overnight rentals. Got it. And the bed and breakfast. And I think there's some information to be gleaned from that. One casualty of the planning process in the last couple of years has been the bed and breakfast permitted in this county. Some years ago, one wrongly permitted bed and breakfast, actually an overnight rental, unsupervised, abused the standards, and a lot of neighbors complained. Bed and breakfasts were soon classified as legal non-conforming, and they remain so to this day. In my view, this is a failure of the planning process that I hope to see changed in the near future. At the Planning Commission meeting of October 26, 2020, of course, you can see this recording, B&Bs were berated by P&Z member Garrish Willis and as just another scam to grab money from tourists and to disregard local and neighborhood desires for rural community character. In fact, then Mr. Willis had no idea that there were different types of permits, bed and breakfast versus overnight rentals, or how many of either had been issued. Recently, Ms. McGann engaged Economic Development, I guess it's formerly the Travel Council, with discussion on how to attract a more responsible visitor. My premise is that Grand County's bed and breakfast host that exact type of visitor, a position backed up by Ms. Gisler in her comments at that fateful October 2020 meeting. While I have a great deal of hope for the direction of future planning, the planning of the future of Grand County under the guidance of Mr. Gunther, I hope that the Planning Department, the P&Z Commission, and the County Council will review that October 2020 meeting for a sense of context and perspective, bringing us to this point and moving forward to give the bed and breakfast community in Grand County the respect and support that we deserve. May I just take one final moment to bring up the agenda for today's meeting and say that perhaps an appropriate time for some discussion on that matter might be under item 2, general plan update, roundtable review, letter B, focus on action-oriented policies embedded under each section, and as needed, identify any missing pieces. I hope I've come in under 3 minutes. I think I have, and I hope I have not come across as crazy as I might have in the past, but it's a matter of concern for me, a great deal of concern. I follow planning meetings and county council meetings diligently. So good luck to us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz, for your comments and your engagement. Are there any other citizens that'd like to be heard at this time? I do see a phone number ending in 9775 here. I'm not sure if that could be a citizen or a commissioner on the call here. But if you are, I'm sorry?
I think that's Mallory.
Okay, great. If there are any other citizens to be heard, please speak now, state your name. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to commission member disclosures. Are there any members of either the Planning Commission or the County Commission that have any disclosures to make today? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to general business action items, starting with our general plan update, review, and feedback, which is the focus of this joint meeting today. And I'll go ahead and hand off to Chair Campbell to facilitate and guide us here along the way. Thanks, Emily.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And with only 2 hours, this is going to go really fast. So I want to just give a really quick overview of how we want to use this time to get the most out of it as possible. In a moment, we'll ask John to give a quick update from P&Z specific to timing. This is one step in many to move us forward. And then what we'll do is round robin through the table of contents with each working group presenting from their section. I'm going to hope that each of us take no more than 10 minutes for each section, which gives ample time for discussion and then close out. Some sections won't require a full 10 minutes. I'm imagining we might need to flex that a little bit for land use in particular. So what we're going to do is each group is going to get an opportunity to present just a quick summary of your section. We've got in the agenda for the workshop here, kind of a quick overview. If anything is missing, just call it out. Any changes that need to be brought aware to the body that they are recommending, and specifically anything that needs discussion, anything that may be controversial. This is an opportunity for us to get especially feedback from the county commission, so that when we go forward and return a recommendation, it's in line with your expectations, and also hopefully as close to the best version of the document as it can be. So we are especially looking for input from county commissioners on anything that staff or the planning commission needs to spend additional time on. And we'll let you kind of facilitate your own section for those 10 minutes. But if things start to get off the rail, I might just kind of collect us back to refocus and stay on track for timing. So with that, John, do you want to take just like 30 seconds, just give us a really quick overview of where we're going, and then we will go into our first working group, which is OB and Mary. And John, if you're speaking, you're muted and we can't hear you.
How's that? That better?
Better. There you are.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Emily, and thank you, Gabe, for the introduction from the County Commission. There's a couple of things I would like to add to Emily's comments. This is an ongoing process, so it's not like the only time. It is an opportunity for County Commission and Planning Commission to compare notes, but it's not going to be the only time to do that. You should be looking at a shared screen that basically has a timetable attached to it, which we're trying to follow as lockstep as we can administratively. And I realize some things get sideways. But it is a big document. It's missing things still. We're not going to go back and redraft those each time they come in front of the commission. Otherwise, we'd be dealing with a moving target all the time. So there have been a number of significant updates since you would have seen this on Google Drive, and I'll go there in a minute. One of them is adding the whole mapping section. We have a lot of maps in our county. It's amazing how many we have, and there's no way we can adopt all of them. I think I've got about 30 pages of maps right now. So that's going to have to be edited. The resource management section is a big state section. Obviously, sometimes it doesn't seem like it appears that it's going to do much, but it's a big area that we need to focus in on. There's a lot of historical documents too that I'm trying to pull in, and this is what makes the general plan really tick, is where these things start to work together. For example, the scenic corridor one, which was done and semi-adopted by commission. I'm not sure, I couldn't find actual formal adoption by that. It looks like it was referenced, but not formally adopted. So one of the goals is to actually formally adopt some of the planning documents as council, commission, and planning commission and county commission see fit. So those references to the public, dialogue, all of that still to happen. And it might sound like a lot of gaps there, but I think we were about 75% there as far as a draft document is concerned. So those things are still being updated. In the schedule that you're looking at, we did do a bit of an outreach for the draft general plan, along with the Unified Transportation Plan on November the 10th. That's not appearing in this here the way it should. And we've got a fair bit of feedback there. And I think that was more of a collaboration exercise to get people together, because really we were not looking at a draft document at that time. November, December is really the staff meetings, pulling those things together, drafting our document and getting it ready for stakeholder review. I should just emphasize the fact that this is a top-down approach, and I have no hesitation saying that, because really the bottom-up approach is still coming. And this will be a gap analysis. So it's really taking a look at where the policies are, how they work together or not, and how we can fill those gaps over time. And there are a lot. And in my experience, I think your gap analysis here is pretty extensive, and that will depend on what the commission's priorities are. Some of that will happen today, hopefully, but it's an ongoing exercise. So the goal, you'll see at the bottom, number 10 is March 1st for adoption in front of the county commission. That might be a bit ambitious, but that's a top-down approach with a gap analysis, with an implementation strategy, and linking that to the county development regulations, which includes, I know everybody likes to jump to this, the land use code. So, and includes other development regulations like the sign ordinance, anything else that's actually regulatory related as far as general plan is concerned. And that can be a lot of different development regulations involved. So there's an implementation strategy that's drafted in section 15 right now. And that's one of the reasons we are hoping the commissions will identify priorities, not the final chance of that as we start going through this exercise today. So if you look at the schedule, everything should be unfolding. The universe is unfolding as they say, as it should. January 10th is our review. We had January 4th. There's a joint meeting, so it's actually January 10th. So we're about 6 or 7 days behind. And then our goal would be to, out of these comments that are made today, we'll be documenting them, even though they may sound like they're slipping through the cracks. We'll document them. We'll put a rationale together, and then we'll have responses from staff for each one of those comments as they move forward through public review. And so as we start doing that, the next step will be to get to a pre-final or penultimate draft that'll be submitted to the county commission very shortly after this session. And then that will be released, start to be released to the public for the overview and workshops. And so I know I'm probably saying too much here, but one of the other things I want to say is that the steering committee that we have for the general plan right now, which is, we believe, pretty representative, will also be the steering committee for our land use analysis. And that will be following in sync with the general plan. Now, that being said, legally, I realize the general plan in the state of Utah doesn't have as much legal standing as it does in other states. That being said, I think one of the major goals is to actually identify where those gaps are the most important for you. And I would say that most of that's got to do with housing. So HDHO, overnight accommodation overlay, Marcus kind of touched on that, and all of you will want to be interested in that too. Service commercial, service industrial, where growth should occur, what that pattern of growth should look like over time, both slow, medium, and long range, and what that scenario, those scenario plans look like. Our land use consultant's been working really busily to get some of those scenarios together. So this will be bounced off the steering committee hopefully in January. And then we'll be setting up joint meetings with the public to go over the land use strategies, with the planning commission to go over the scenario planning and the county commission, and to dovetail that with the transportation one. That sounds like a lot of planning work in a short period of time, and it really is. So after all of that is done, hopefully near the first part of March, then we will begin the grassroots neighborhood planning exercise. We have some strategies we've put together draft-wise right now, which needs to come in front of both commissions. And that really is going out where this is the fun part of planning. We're actually going out and working with the public in neighborhoods and talking about what gaps are there, what can be changed, what kinds of focus they have, thinking in terms of action plans in each one of the neighborhoods. Land use is a big question, infrastructure is a big one, water especially. So all of that will be a grassroots exercise that we're not forgetting. It's just that it's the second or big phase. So that's a summary of kind of where we've been going. Nothing's really changed as far as that pattern is concerned, but we're certainly open for comments, just generally speaking on that timetable, Emily.
I'm going to recommend we save comments on the timetable until the end of the workshop, time permitting, and make sure that we get through discussion. But we'll try and save a few minutes at the end to make sure that if there's any wrap-up items, we cover them. Okay, with that, we're going to dive in. And as I mentioned, at this point with our timing, even 10 minutes per section probably won't be enough. If you can go through it quickly, please do. Land use is going to require a little bit more time, and we'll just see where we're at an hour in. Sound good? Okay. John, great. You're sharing. If any working group has something to share, just let us know. Otherwise, Obi and Mary, we are starting with decision-making section 4 in the current semi.
So Mary, do you want me to go ahead and do this to start with?
Yes, Obi and I have met and spoken, and yes, and Obi, did you send the summary to everyone or just to me?
I will make sure everybody gets the summary, and I'm going to try to go fast through this. And then Mary, why don't you just add what I missed. Basically, in reading this section, I think it does a good job of listing kind of official groups and boards and committees in their roles and decision making. Mentions, of course, citizens, but I think Mary and I thought that what it would be good to think about strategies for getting the public involved in decision making in general now for the general, not just for the general plan, and also NGOs that don't have these kind of official titles and official connections. So I'm going to give you a breakdown of ideas. And many of these are already in the documented kind of comments. So here's one idea that we had. NGOs should be encouraged to sign up on Grand County Connects to receive updates of issues of concern to them. So this is a thing that some federal agencies do. They'll say, well, if you're interested in fire prevention, we'll send you stuff that we have on it when that comes up as a problem. Another one is having an annual community survey. Eventually, I'll get to which ones we want to discuss probably, but an annual community survey, kind of general, what do you think of development? What do you think of increased density, affordable housing, the kinds of things we've had in some other surveys, some of which, of course, are in this Spanish Valley survey that is now up on Grand County Connects. Here's one that we probably should discuss at one point, open house meetings with the Planning Commission and separately with the Grand County Council. These might happen 2 or 3 times a year. There'd be a very brief presentation, maybe 10, maximum 15 minutes of what, let's say, is facing the Planning Commission, what issues look like they're coming up, what are important issues, what will we be discussing, and then have people give us feedback and also bring up any issues that they have, because this is one way we can try to get the public involved, and one way we can hear their kind of opinions. We plagiarize at all times. I think Tom Lear said, plagiarize, 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 let nothing of importance evade your eyes, something like that. And we plagiarize. We think Emily's comment on the hybrid model of commission meetings is important. Again, getting citizens to participate, often more comfortably, probably over Zoom than in person. And I think those are the major things we have in our paper, which I will make sure gets sent on. Is there anything else I want to say? No.
We talked a lot about, we talked a lot about how important. Yes, okay. Obie and I talked about how developing strategies to get citizens involved, because oftentimes that's very difficult. And, looking at maybe doing mailings at certain times to get their attention and get the involvement. That's all I wanted to add.
Then I only wanted to say, and absolutely, and of course, a mailing would probably go out for having a survey so people would at least know where it is. So what might need discussion, certainly if the county council and the planning commission are going to hold kind of 2 or 3 times a year, open sessions, and I don't know if they're called workshops or open houses. That's one, and probably the community survey, which probably costs some money and time. So we'd be kind of interested in what people think about those ideas.
Great.
And mainly if it's not a good idea, you should tell us you don't want to see kind of a suggestion of these things happening in the general plan.
So county commissioners, as we go through some of these more assertive suggestions from group to group, again, I think we'll be looking to you to weigh in if you have any specific concerns. We don't need to go into the concerns or controversies on this call, but just marking them, as well as anything that you think requires additional data or research from staff and the planning commission before this comes to you in a final draft form. Otherwise, it sounds like staff will be taking notes and we'll move on as we kind of conclude each section.
If I could just jump in there quickly, Emily, and thank you for those comments, Mary and Obi. The other thing that's happening at the same time with the general plan is the strategic plan review, which is actually in the decision-making section. You should be able to see that on the screen right now, which is taking the draft strategic plan that the county commission developed earlier in the year. And it's been embedded as best as it can. It can be better, of course, into the general plan as far as priorities are concerned. And you'll see that a lot of the references to public engagement, stewardship, sustainability, the kind of preserving the culture, the communication culture we already have and enhancing it is fundamental to this decision-making section. This is brand new too. This is nothing that the general plan has in it right now. So this is an important section for elected officials and administration working together with the public.
Okay. Thank you, Mary and OB. Anything else there? Otherwise, we'll move on to our next section of sustainability. Any questions for Mary and OB? Anything that needs to be touched on? Great. I imagine some of these topics will require more discussion than others. Let's move on to sustainability, which is also OB and Sarah, and this is section 5 in the semi-final draft.
I have the same question. Sarah and I were unable to get together, so we'll probably do this a bit separately. Sarah, should I go first?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Obi.
Okay, so here is what is missing, probably a bit of my list, and I bet it will duplicate some of Sarah's. Great sustainability thing, and very nice things said about kind of in general sustainability and stewardship and things like that. Maybe not as specific as I would have probably liked. So I think we should probably have some goals for water conservation. It's interesting, the city has such goals and a water conservation report. I don't know, it might be 35 pages long. The idea of in the future, for at least big developments, and of course this needs some discussion, requiring some solar, some wind, a bit, probably solar power, typically not wind, and rooftop collection of water, etc., on sites. So that's kind of a site-specific thing. We probably need a water committee in the county, which is an interesting sort of thing. Again, Moab has a water committee, basically look out for the county's interest in water. And at some point, trying to gauge how much water we have, how fast can we grow, or how much can we grow, and taking into consideration climate change. That is, of course, a big load on any kind of committee. And I think those were the sorts of things that I had down, and when I had down for what probably needed discussion. Well, you know, if we're going to have a water committee, it's certainly going to be appointed by the county commission. If that seems like a good idea, it maybe should go into the plan. There's certainly lots of other committees on lots of other topics. And whether the county thinks we ought to think about in terms of growth management, how much water do we actually have? How much water we're likely to have with climate change. And what does that mean? Of course, you gotta, this is a very tough project. It's very tough to do, but what does that mean in terms of growth for us? So Sarah, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Obi. Yeah, I agree with some of those big takeaways, like that the sustainability section seems sort of vague, and I just had a few specific things to add into goals. Obi, I completely agree about some kind of water committee. My thought was that we need to write in there that the county's going to participate in a county-wide groundwater monitoring program and base land use decisions off of the prudent predictions for future declines in water availability. And I think that fits in perfectly with the water committee that might orchestrate that program, and also kind of synthesize the data and come up with conclusions. So that's a big one. And then I had a question on, I'm sorry, I had a lot of technical difficulties trying to open up this docx document, and I got it on office.com, and then it said I couldn't edit it because somebody else was doing it, even though I uploaded it myself. I don't know. So I couldn't make any edits, but I just took notes. I ask why in there it says something about making a voluntary checklist for sustainable green development and incentivizing it. And I say, why not actually try to develop better code, more energy efficiency, passive solar, water retaining landscapes? And I know that parts of that are in other places. It just seems like, why talk about a voluntary checklist when our goals and policies should be to upgrade the code? And then policy for the transportation section, I thought we should highlight the need to work on commuter bike trails and active transportation trails. Maybe it's kind of a given, but it wasn't as a goal. And then there's a recycling section, and I thought it should include composting goals as well as recycling. And for the sustainable neighborhoods sort of section, I thought that we should also include a goal or a policy of creating safe bike to school routes for kids whenever possible. And those were my main takeaways. I think that the big one is do we incentivize these green developments, or do we actually just make our code better? And I think maybe some of both is necessary, but yeah, in addition to the groundwater monitoring program. So do people have questions or comments, or does anything there jump out as being?
I'd like some guidance in the form of discussion about how we feel balancing our natural constraints, particularly water, with growth-oriented goals, especially related to economic diversification. And this will in part come up during the economic development section and shows how intertwined this all is. On one extreme, it's been suggested that potentially we might need to pause development while we develop our water resources. On the other extreme, maybe not extreme, but on the other side, we hear, water sound policies, conservation, reducing use while supporting economic development goals. Do we have a general feel, or can we get from the commission some of the trade-offs that we need to consider so we can have a more assertive approach listed in the document?
So I had two ideas related to that. One is, there's a lot of uncertainty about, what a sustainable amount of water we can draw is. So I think it would probably be premature in the next few months to say, here's what we're going to do in terms of controlling the pace of development. But we could sketch out, three different scenarios: high, medium, and low. Here are some things we would do if we're very concerned and we're worried about bumping up against, the limits of our aquifer soon. And here are some milder policies that we would do, saying, and then here's what we do if we discovered, hey, we've got all the water we need for the next 50 years. And so I don't think I think it was premature to decide between those three paths, but I think just working out specific planning prescriptions that would go with those sort of 3 different levels of concern about water that might be a good start. And then my second comment is much more nuts and bolts, and I'm sorry if maybe Obi mentioned it already, but maybe we could start trying to track in a pretty precise way just how much water we're using. Take we give a permit for a hotel, we've got okay, X many gallons per year per room, and just have that. We spend a lot of time trying to estimate the available water, but I think we should also try to get more precise estimates on the water we're actually using and the water that will be used if vested growth is built, and maybe also an idea of how much conservation measures could change that number. And so this would just initially just be data gathering. If we suddenly use a lot of water, it wouldn't trigger anything, but I think it's just good for people to know on a project by project basis just the water implications of things they're approving. So if we start keeping track of that now, I think it'll help us in the future.
Any other comments here or discussion from Kevin's points?
I think that's a great point.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Sarah.
go ahead, Steve. No, I already spoke on this.
I was just going to say that I really like Kevin's idea of plotting out kind of like the high, medium, and low. At least it kind of creates a bit of a paper trail and of like where this could ultimately go, and give some folks an idea of where we're looking to go. Because I just, in so many of our conversations at the planning commission level, water comes up, and it's just one of these things. It's just kind of, it's out there vaguely. It's on a lot of our minds, but I think, citizens and developers alike would benefit from having something kind of on paper where we might be going towards once the data comes in, I think is the big thing. So I really like that idea.
What I was going to say is kind of along those lines of that, like the data is never just going to come in because it's ever forming and we get different rainfall. And so that's why I think it's so important that Grand County participates in this ongoing groundwater management program and is working with San Juan County and Moab City and everyone else in the Valley on these things. Because groundwater science, I think, is hard, to make conclusions of anyway. So yeah, I guess I just think that's really important.
Is there general agreement that this is an area where having a strategic framework, even if the details within that framework are ambiguous at times, is something we should invest time in before moving this forward to final draft? Again, commissioners, I'm particularly looking for you to give some general direction.
If I could just comment on that too, Emily. This section, I know it sounds like we have the answers to everything, but the section on water is not front and center here yet because it's still a big draft part that I was still working on in December. And in the midst of all of that, we have this consortium, or what do you want to call it, that Mark Stilson's kind of initiated or helped initiate or facilitate. And we are now members of that group. And that is an ongoing question. There's a decision-making chart that we put together with Arnie. And so going forward, as far as the gap analysis is concerned, back to Kevin's point, is that the data is one thing, the demand side is another. What policies there are and what regional governance there is are all big issues. All of those will be identified in the plan. They don't come across clearly yet, but they are being formulated. So I don't think they're tapping into a lot of things that you have not already mentioned. It's just that will be a gap analysis because there's no way you can fill that gap. And I think you all agree within a document that still missing a lot of data. And so it's identifying where those priorities are, how the governance structure should work, which or not, because it's not working very well, I don't think right now, although we've got really good people. So I think it's tapping into a lot of that too. And you as decision makers, this will be a fundamental one as far as the growth scenarios, growth management scenarios, because it's not necessarily you have to grow, but to manage growth is really an important part of public-private land development. So hopefully that adds a bit more of some background.
Great. For the sake of time, if there's no further discussion here, then I'm going to move us on. So last call for comments on sustainability. All right, this next section, I imagine we're going to need a bit more time on, but I am going to try and cap us to just end the discussion by 3 o'clock to save room for the back half. And if we end sooner, that's great. This is land use, which is our, I know what a trifecta is. I don't know what a fourfecta is, but we've got Steve and Josie, Trish and Kevin on this section. So who wants to run point here? Sarah or excuse me, Trish or Kevin, do one of the two of you want to sort of surmise where you sit, or would you rather a different approach?
I can say something if no one else wants to go first. I think, I put a lot of specific comments on the draft, and so I don't want to go over each of those individually. I think people who are curious can read the draft, but I think there are some sort of more overarching points that I'll try to briefly emphasize. One is, it seemed to me that there was a lot of kind of generic language in here that didn't fit our community as well as it might fit, a typical town in the US. I think we're, quite a bit smaller, and especially in the unincorporated part of the county, more rural than a lot of places. And there's, anyway, so a lot of the, I'm guessing that these bullet points weren't just written, many of them were lifted from other places, but I just wonder if we could try to adapt things a little bit more to the county. Another general set of comments is there's been, I think since the last general plan, this sort of interest in sort of neighborhood nodes or nodes of development or commercial nodes. And I know when I was on the Planning Commission, that was a popular idea. But I guess one comment is, I just wonder about the economic practicality of that, especially if you're a commercial enterprise and you're not on Highway 191, then you're depending mostly on the people who live, close by, and that, might be a pretty small number of people. So I just wonder, before we put too much effort into looking at that, just try to crunch the hard numbers about whether such things are viable or what density of housing it requires to make it viable. I don't have a good idea about the answers to those questions, but I do think if you were to stick a convenience store at the intersection of Murphy Lane and Old Mill Trail or something like that near where I live, I don't think they'd get enough business to stay in business. So next comment. This is kind of technical, but it's important. There's a lot of mention of the North Corridor here. And I know when I was on the Planning Commission, there was a lot of confusion about where the North Corridor was. Does it kind of stretch from city limits to Arches entrance? That would be our resort commercial zone, or is it more like up by 313, which is the resort special zone? I mean, that's how previous general plans divide things up. I think sometimes it seems to me that when people say North Corridor, they just mean the mirror image of the South Corridor, the areas very close to town. But sometimes it seems like they're talking about 191 all the way up to the airport or something. And so I just think we need to be very careful about which area we're talking about, and maybe we should abandon the term North Corridor and just come up with two unambiguous names. And well, I'll stop there. So sorry, those are not, I didn't want to try to summarize the entire section. I just wanted to zero in on some specific things. So maybe someone else can give a better overview.
As we go through this, in addition to just sharing the updates, I mean, Kevin, is there anything that you think is particularly controversial or needs discussion, or that the county commission should weigh in on now so these, stay on the rails?
Well, embedded in this section, there's a number of lists of goals and policies. And I think if you were to just pull those out into a shorter document, just 2 or 3 pages or something, that would be much more likely to be read by everyone, and instead of, putting them in the middle of a very large document like this. And so I think getting feedback on those might be a good thing to do.
Mhm.
And I think also, I think, a typical commissioner who's being asked to review this entire large thing, might not even find their way to those sections, but I think they are important. And I think they're unlike a lot of the just sort of, recitation of various plans that we have and things like that. It's the kind of things that people might disagree about. So good to focus attention on those. Actually, I have a question. Maybe it's a question for John. That there's some headings here, like I forget the names, but it looked like a proposal. I was just wondering, you have like different densities of residential zones in the plan. Is that meant to be a prescription for a new set of land use code zones, or it's supposed to line up exactly with our existing zones, or what?
Yeah, so Kevin, thanks for your comments. The goal was to actually just outline some performance-based land use criteria, update a fair bit of what's already in the general plan, and then point towards the gaps that will be filled by the land use analysis as it goes forward, identifying a number of things that you've already raised. One of them will be what growth scenarios there might be, where development should occur. There's an exercise in what's called a level of service analysis, which is taking a look at where infrastructure currently is, where development could develop, with that pattern, a path to development could occur, not only in kind of the corridor question, the node question. As you know, some of the rural residential gets pretty amorphous and it's harder to identify. And there's always a caution out there that hangs over a county development, and that is the more you sprawl, the more you build single family detached, the more you lose developable land for the long term. And the more difficult it is to maintain financial stability over time, because they never pay for themselves. They're always digging a hole as far as revenue is concerned. So there's a big fiscal question there as far as cost of development. So I think the question you're asking, or the point you're making, is that these general land use descriptions that are here are meant to be fairly performance oriented, generic. They would connect eventually to the land use code. So that is the symmetry between a good long-range policy document that's got land use in it and the connection to the actual entitlements that have come across in a land use code. We were very disjointed, as you probably know, right now. So the goal is to actually bring those things in much more in alignment from a policy perspective, which is what the general plan should be doing, and aligning that with the land use code. So a good description of that is the split zones along Highway 191. For commercial. There's really not good policy in that area as far as the general plan is concerned, even here. But when we get through to the land use analysis, and after doing this top-down approach, the goal is by June or July of this year, that will be more clearly understood as far as the policy area is concerned and how the development regulations should work.
So like there's
Sorry,
headings.
I'm going to interrupt really quick. John, would you mind making sure anyone who's in the waiting room is able to join, since you're the host of the meeting?
Oh,
Apologies for interrupting, Kevin.
No problem. So, just asking the question again, there are headings called hot, low density residential, medium density residential, high density residential. Are we imagining that the land use, that this plan is going to have a map showing where those three different things are, sort of a future land use plan, or maybe just a description of the current condition? Or I guess that's one of the points I was confused about.
yeah. So this is actually just going to capture basically what we currently have as far as land use is concerned. There'll be some changes to that section, this section. It will start to focus as quickly as we can before March 1st on the levels of service analysis. So that is where the services are, where they can be provided. So yes, a map. I thought I admitted Tony once already, but so the idea is that we do map this. It will be a gap to begin with because we won't have it all completely set up that way. But by the time we get to June, there'll be a significant change to the whole land use section, which obviously is a public review process too. And that will hopefully link directly with the land use code. Hopefully that, and I realize I'm giving you a very generic response to your question, Kevin, but that's the goal, is to actually get this really much more long range land use descriptions, which is the goal in a general plan, and to have those work together with the other sections, both sustainability, infrastructure, and the other elements that go along with that.
And these descriptions, are they descriptive or prescriptive? Is it?
These are meant to be performance oriented, not descriptive, not prescriptive.
Okay.
Yeah. With smart growth principles, all the 10 commandments of good planning are embedded in here. So if we go back to the terms, you remember those terms: built infrastructure, built environment, Kevin? I know that was one of your boondoggles that you didn't like, that the use of the term built environment. So the goal is to actually come and start to show these much more in a presentation perspective that actually deals with much more sustainable development, that is ground oriented, eyes on the street, walkable areas, less car dominated, less strip mall, much more mixed use integration. All of those kinds of things are part of this smart growth.
Let's move the conversation forward to the other three planning commissioners, county commissioner who worked on this section. Are there additional topics to raise as far as additions, omissions, or conversations?
I went through this section again a couple days ago and just added a couple more pointed comments and some questions. I'm just not sure if it's appropriate to really get into them right now, because it might be into the weeds a little too much.
Well, if it's anything that's, we would need direction from county commission on how to answer those questions or ensure the document does. I think it's worth raising the ones that you think are most important for any comment.
I think maybe like the one thematic thing that comes out, and this is, I think, dovetailing off of what Kevin was just speaking to, but we use the term preserving rural and historical character, and I think as we come out with this land use study and we start to create policy and some really define where development can happen, I mean, I just see that as being in a pretty blunt juxtaposition to like this 10-minute walkability, because if we've got acres, 1 unit per acre rural residential throughout the county, like the 10-minute walkability isn't going to be feasible in a lot of locations. And so I just see that as kind of being the thing that bubbles to the surface again of, what you did with the HDHO and the PUD. So I just kind of bring that up again, because that question of, or how do we compromise between how does our county ought to develop with some more clustered higher density versus the rural character. I mean, we're going to see that question pop up again in our planning commission rezoning application tonight. So it's still there, it's not going away. And so I wanted to call that out as kind of like the red flag I see that ought to be clarified as best as possible. Not sure how to do it, but there you have it.
Yeah, so maybe piggybacking on Steve's comments, I think it is, I mean, that's one of the real important debates we have in this county is this sort of tension between, the advantages of clustering and other advantages of having more, spread out. And, even if, sorry, I'm not going to pick a side in that debate, but I think it is a debate that seems to come up over and over again. And if some of these remarks here could kind of zero in more on that kind of issue, and instead of just talking, relatively vaguely about, 10-minute walkability and things like that. I guess I'd like to see language like, okay, in these areas, we're going to go for denser development, and in these other areas, we're not. And that would be useful, and that would sort of move the debate forward. And it just feels to me like this plan as written now isn't there yet.
So knowing in the near future, we have master planning specific to nodes and neighborhoods that will draw some of this out. I guess, one way of looking at this is if we had two ways of asserting this, one was in Grand County, wordsmithing aside, in Grand County, we will always promote a, in the unincorporated areas of the county anyway, we will always promote, you know, the rural quality of life and versus in Grand County, we want to promote and emphasize walkability and business development equitably across the county versus in nodes. You know, where do we feel between those two on it? And then do we want to be more assertive towards one or the other? And again, county commissioners, I particularly want to get your input here so that we can make sure that we take that forward.
I actually have a question of John. Probably, I'm guessing the general plan will have a future land use kind of map, which would designate areas for more dense development. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's what Kevin was asking, and maybe I didn't respond well enough. Yeah, that's the goal, is to actually focus development. When I say level of service, there's a bit of level of service discussion here. Level of service 1 is sewer, water, stormwater management, good access, road development, not in the floodplain, not in hazardous lands, not in steep slopes, good ridge line and view corridor protection. Level of service 2 is water without sewer, fairly good access, all the other issues being handled fairly well as far as density is concerned around impacts of floodplain. And then level of service 3 is really a rural kind of framework. Now, level of service 1 and 2 are usually urban areas of development. So those will hopefully be part of the articulation of the relationships between land use and infrastructure, and will all be mapped. And there's a number of different layers there, obviously, that need to work together. Fundamentally, that's the nature of comprehensive planning, is these pieces work together. And there's lots of tension here. I think you guys are identifying a bunch of them. Ridge line of view corridors is another one, because you can move buildings close to the road and restrict view corridors. So that's a natural tension that occurs as well. So you got to be careful with that too. Does that help, Bob?
Yes.
So since no other commissioners piped up yet to Emily's question, I'll take a stab at an answer. I mean, I guess what I was envisioning is that we would have both of the things you mentioned in the plan, and some you know, I think some areas might be targeted for keeping the existing density the same, and other areas might be targeted for increasing density. And so I think the general language about, you know, we always want to preserve blah, 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 or we always want 10-minute walkability in neighborhood nodes, that doesn't seem useful to me. I think there's, you know, both of those patterns should probably be discussed here, and then we should have a map indicating, like, you know, what direction we want things to move or not move. Yeah.
An acceptable answer to any question is always you're asking the wrong question. So that's also fine.
I thought it was almost the right question.
But I do hear you saying, you know, one, specifics at the plotting, the map level will help. I have also, and I saw this in your comments, kind of generally, it does seem like we need some cleanup of this section. There are places where we use terms that are not relevant to our county. There are places where we use terms, but we are not specific in how we define them and how we define the value of them, such as walkability. So it just seems like we need to just generally tighten up this section and make sure we are very clear in what we are asserting, even if it might be applied in different ways and in different places. So we're just about at 3, which was my arbitrary limit. I do have one comment, but I want to withhold that to make sure there's no additional conversation or discussion we need to carry forward for this section.
I just have one quick comment. There's a little bit of a redundancy, and I'm not sure if that's just you know, to a certain degree allowable in a document like this. But heritage and history, the 6.3, 1.1.4, the same sort of concept is covered in a similar fashion ahead in section 13 on culture. And so I wonder if that could be an opportunity to lighten this section a little bit by removing it from this one, or if it needs to be in land use. I understand that as well, but it's just something I noticed, some redundancy there.
I had one more thing I wanted to say, and I think it's actually a repeat of something I said before, but I think there are, embedded within this section, I think there's some important lists of goals and possible future policies. And important in the sense that it sort of gives guidance to land use code revisions. And so I think it would be good for us to think hard about those. I think, often, once, in past general plans, typically I find that no one, bothers reading the whole 100 pages. They just go to, page 27 where there's this list of goals and those get cited over and over again. And so I think it's good to have those lists. I think it's sort of the right level of detail. It's not a specific policy, but it is sort of making some decisions. It's not kind of generic language that anyone could nod their head and agree with. But I think, focusing on those, I think they could be, I made a few suggestions for additional goals to be added, but I bet there are a lot more, so.
Any other comments from this working group? John, do you mind scrolling to page 49? I'm assuming it's page 49 in your document. I want to call out something that I raised when the Planning Commission workshopped this, but I do think it's worth hitting in this group, and that's how we speak of tourism, particularly in our land use planning section. There are two areas that I specifically call out, but I don't think that that is the only place. The first is under highway and arterial commercial use, we explicitly say that the purpose of this use is the intention of making the county more attractive as a tourism destination while providing leading commercial activity. Those need to be inverted. And I will be very assertive. I think there are places where, anywhere that we raise tourism specifically as a priority needs to be balanced by a focus on our residents. The other place is just down below under policies, under commercial. We say we want to maintain the neighborhood, encourage hotels and associated tourist uses in neighborhood nodes, highway and arterial commercial zones, and so on. Again, this is completely contrary to where we have stood as a community. And there are other places where we explicitly say, I think that maybe this comes up in economic development, that we want to promote tourism. Acknowledging that this is the current economic base and that we have many entrepreneurs and local businesses that rely on our continued investment here, I insist that we put the needs of our residents first. So I want to make sure that I'm not alone in carrying that torch.
No, it's funny. I had a remark about the encourage hotels, which seems to have disappeared. But yeah, I agree with those points.
I know Gabe and I think it was Gabe, it was late last night, emailed back and forth with a similar sort of sentiment, just writ large across the plan, understanding that tourism is really only been an economic. Tourism exists now for maybe the last 20 or 30 years. And we don't want it to take an outsized role in what our community is about.
Yeah,
I agree with
Go, Mary.
I agree with putting residents first. That's how I want to just let you know. I agree.
All right, I assume that would be the case just uniformly, but I wanted to make sure to raise it in case there was any nuance or discussion that need to be had. So is there any other discussion on the land use section, any additions or omissions that need to be raised or direction to staff or planning commission? Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and move us on. All right. Thank you all. So this takes us to transportation, which was me and Evan, and I actually just emailed a link to the two one-pagers that I was involved with. One is transportation and one is economic development. Evan, do you want me to share my screen and just kind of walk through it, or and then add any comments from there?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So hopefully this will be pretty succinct. Make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Generally speaking, we thought that this section was sound and well written. The additions that we wanted to recommend, which I don't imagine will be terribly controversial, One is that in our introduction, the introduction actually is great, and the framing of transportation both as a means of access and thorough use of the county, but also a way to consider economic justice and equity. As developments move further and further from the city center, for example, we just wanted to add a sentence to make it very clear that we think that this supports sustainability, mixed use goals, and ultimately makes our economy more resilient. We did add a second goal under that first section. There are some places down below where we touch on emerging technologies, but Evan, I don't remember if it was that you had seen this in other general plans or that you anticipated this, but we are already seeing emerging uses, things such as like the flying machines, I don't even know what they're called in the valley, electric scooters, personal electric vehicles, and so on. We think that we need to start planning for this now, even if just like water, the actual impacts and details are sort of remaining to be seen. We'd like to see just a little emphasis on protecting our residential areas, not just from truck traffic, but also from parking and operations, as conversations about truck stops and similar uses have come up. A focus on noise pollution, not just air pollution from transportation, being a priority of the county. And just the two down here, the first is that we've seen a couple master plans come up in years past, not as recently, where historic access through trails that were not officially designated were put at risk, especially where those trails offer access to public space or as sort of connections between trails. So ideally, we get to a place where all of those designated uses are set in stone and finalized, but we would like to see, where that's not the case, a policy to maintain historic access. And finally, as we look to our trail systems, there are places where conflicts between uses aren't just an issue in the backcountry, they're also occasionally an issue in the front country. And so where we have trails, we want to make sure that we create accessible use for non-motorized uses, or specifically non-vehicular motorized uses. An example would be the trail system that abuts 191 is under heavy usage by ATVs and other vehicles. And it's completely non-usable as a bicycle, even though it does exist as a trail system. So we just want to make sure that we are keeping those in mind. Anything I missed, Evan?
No, that was good.
So I don't think anything in here is particularly controversial, and there was nothing that we called out as needing discussion from our perspective, but I want to make sure that there's no need to discuss or anything that should be added or removed.
As the commissions know, this section will be completely redrafted after June because of the Transportation Master Plan. There are some gaps in the Transportation Master Plan as far as the scope is concerned already. You've hit on a couple of them. The airport is one, and different types of mobility looking forward. It's hard to project those kinds of mobility changes, but they are looming, and we know that automated vehicle movements will start to happen more and more as people start developing different ways of mobility, and that technology is ramping up in lots of jurisdictions already.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just interject really quick, John? When you mentioned that, it made me think that about the land use section similarly might also be updated when the land use study is complete. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so yeah, for example, parking in a lot of cases should be minimized with more autonomous types of vehicles as time goes by, or different ways of moving around the area. The biggest impact for the cost of housing is parking. Parking is the biggest hit, the biggest expense. And there's different ways of kind of managing that. We know that the car dominates our developed environment quite dramatically in the parking area too. So not only from the infrastructure perspective, but also from just the land use perspective.
So I understood Elisa's question differently. I guess, in the near future, we're going to be revising the land use code. And I thought the question was, is that going to sort of feed back into the previous section of the general plan about land use.
Well, I guess I
Similarly
was,
to trans-
I was thinking in terms of the land use study that we currently have going on with the consultant, which would be finished after the general plan is adopted, I think. And so the same thing with the transportation plan, but those two studies will, once they're completed, they will update their respective sections. So transportation will update the transportation section, the land use study, and the future land use map that's generated out of that would go in and update the land use section of the general plan, which is kind of going backwards when we were discussing that earlier in the meeting, but I just wanted to maybe make that connection.
Right.
Yeah,
Any
and,
further
and that's
discussion?
the goal. That's the goal, is actually each one of those sections as they come forward will become, the plan will become better and better and better in every way. And it'll actually become much more comprehensive. It's going to score pretty low because it's got lots of gaps in it right now. But as those sections are updated, the Economic Development Master Plan is the other big section that will be hopefully updated this year. And the impact fee analysis, that's a big section on capital planning that needs attention.
All right, any additional discussion on transportation? Let's move forward to infrastructure. Makeda is out and unable to join us, but this is Tony and Evan.
Oh, Tony, I didn't see your name on it. I had reached out to Makeda and didn't get a hold of her. But this was another one that didn't seem very confrontational. It seemed like there wasn't really any gaps in it. It seemed to cover things, but did you have some stuff, Tony?
No, Evan, I more or less, Makita and I shared, kind of split up the infrastructure and the environment sections, or I'm sorry, the infrastructure and the natural resources and parks sections. She took the lead on this one. And I believe the only couple things that I had, which were non-confrontational, really technical and format things, were addressed during our previous planning commission meeting. I think they've already been integrated. I don't really have a lot for this. Infrastructure is concerned, we know what it is, we know where it is, and it looks good.
That team infrastructure, efficiency. Any other call outs from other members of the two commissions, anything from staff that needs discussion? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay.
If I could just say, it's always hopeful that you would be able to work with all of our public agencies, especially the national parks and state parks, to actually get some land use planning integration going on. That's a tremendous challenge, though. Not only that, for example, the Raptor State Park doesn't have a land management plan in place. They're looking at it, but those kinds of things take time. So to integrate around those areas, around Arches and Canyonlands and Dead Horse Point and Raptors Park, those are so fundamental to me to good land use planning. Not only that, the Forest Service, there's lots of areas of fringe area development and overlap that we can work on. So, but that's the exciting place to actually do good regional planning and working with those partners. So a lot of work to do there.
All right. Doing this over Zoom. This is fun. Thank you all for your continued patience. Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, so our next section is parks, recreation, and natural areas. Also, Tony and Jacques.
I wasn't able to get a hold of Tony or Makita this weekend, but I thought the overall section was really good. I had a few edits that I would make for sure. Nothing too crazy. Mostly just pointing out things regarding land management agencies and areas for recreation, including Lions Park in some of the things with the boulders there. I think that's a great community asset as well. There wasn't any mention of that. Sand Flats, Osta, Old City Park, Lions Park. Let me see a couple of the other things. Emily made a comment on, let's see, it was on page 81 about extraction, and I totally agreed with her there. I think the gist of it was encouraging the expeditious processing of permits for film industry, recreation, and extraction. And I definitely agree that extraction doesn't belong with those other items. Another thing that I had too was to add climbing. There wasn't much said about climbing, but we do have world-class climbing here, along with mountain biking, and I would add that for sure to the list of areas of special interest. Tony, did you have anything?
Yeah, I had a bunch. Can we stop scrolling for a second? Go back to the top of the thing. We just passed the first. I had a few comments here from the Planning Commission. I'm noticing the changes didn't take. In the list of land management agencies, there's also the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. I won't take that personal, but that is the 6th land management agency that we do have here. We are different from Utah State Parks. Yeah, I'll go back and see if it's been versioned or not. Just make sure. There were quite a few technical edits that I made to the first half of this section. I want to make sure that they took, as well as.
Hey, Tony, I should just clarify, you're looking at my document, not the one off of Google.
I'm looking at the one that is being shared with the group on the live
And
stream.
that's the one, that's my document. So this is not off. So this doesn't show your changes. This doesn't show any.
Okay.
This only shows my changes.
Okay.
So yeah, so
Yeah,
that's not an it's not an oversight. It's just one of those things that we are.
Gotcha.
Should we screen share the Google Doc version then, just so that we all kind of have visibility into the sidebar conversation happening in the document?
Yeah, we could do that. I just have to go there, Emily.
Thank you, John. I
And
appreciate
sometimes
it.
that's not always easy. So let me see here. I thought I had it open. And I have it open. No. Okay, just bear with me here. Tony, you can carry on, sorry.
Yeah, my majority of my my comments centered around the description and nature of what land management agencies are and actually do in our area, and the sidebars that county planning has in the reality of what land management looks like. There are things we don't want to upset district rangers and park superintendents by appearing to throw elbows in the face of things like NEPA and FRLIA. So just making sure really that our language is complementary to the missions of land management agencies and doesn't really sound like we're antagonizing anybody. There were a lot of instances where we saw worse uses of words like shall and will be required. And in my experience as a guy who's oftentimes on the other side of the table, that selection of language is very important to how the ongoing conversation regarding land management is going to look. So we just want to make sure that that is polished very well. That was the gist of my main comment in that section. It never works when you try to tell a GS-15 that they shall do something. That's
Yeah, I agree with Tony's remarks that, we definitely need to keep in mind that, we are very far from being the decision makers on all these state and federal.
I encourage, I like phrasing like encourage, or we strongly support, and particularly in things, at least when we talk about how local and regional plans are considered in the context of larger NEPA scale planning, when justifications are raised, we would like to see, an increase of wilderness or conservation areas in our county because of these reasons. That gets people's attention. That increases the substantiveness of co-mutual planning. It gets, people, NEPA planners love long documents.
Another phrase we could word, we will work with our partners at blah, blah, blah to encourage, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but I don't know, show me where all of the language is passive here, unless I'm missing something. And if I am, it's probably because it was misquoted or something, because all of the language here is not mandatory. It is all permissive.
Well, it might have been accepted already. That's just what we discussed during our last planning commission meeting. I'm more or less parroting the conversation we had 3 weeks
Tony,
ago.
that's kind of what the plan is all about, is that's the way you write a general plan, is exactly what you're saying.
Cool.
If there's a will or shalls there, they should be always modified by partnerships and encouragement. That's the beauty of a general plan, is to actually think in terms of dreaming and how you could work together. You don't want to ignore those things, but that's the goal, is to actually be collaborative.
Right, yeah.
So I had a different comment. I haven't read every word of this section, but I scanned through all the section headings, and it seems like there's quite a lot of text spent on, adjacent state and federal lands. But as a county, what we have the most control over are like small neighborhood parks and the trail network, just within Spanish Valley, or maybe Castle Valley too. And I think that those things are really important, and it is something where we, either we get to decide, or we're much more influential. So I apologize if those things are discussed, for more than a page or two and I missed it, but I think it's important to have that in there. And in particular, things like access to public lands. I think a lot of people like to be able to walk out their back door to some nice trail, and sometimes that's blocked by private land. And the county's, I think, done a decent job in the past getting easements through the private land to connect to BLM land, but we need to maintain that policy and strengthen it if possible, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Kevin, can I just ask for a point of clarification? So you mentioned collaboration, working together with Castle Valley. Maybe I'm missing the point here. That's part of, actually, that's a fundamental part of that regional element, is working together with our adjacent jurisdictions.
No, I think I was commenting on two very separate things. I sort of maybe missed the segue.
Okay.
So the later comments had nothing to do with federal land management or anything like that. It's just talking about parks and trails sort of basically within Spanish Valley, within areas that are mostly private land. Because that's where we do have, when we approve a new subdivision or something like that, that's when we have leverage to specify that there be trails. And I just wanted to make sure that was treated in here, because and I was contrasting it to the federal stuff where we can encourage the federal land managers, but ultimately it's their decision, not ours.
I should just mention, Tony, that the town of Castle Valley worked with the BLM on what roads should be closed and opened. Obviously, that's their decision, but quite cooperatively. And maybe we should have also leaned on the county to help us in that process, although I don't think we needed to, but that's an interesting thing. The county can help out in such stuff.
Something else I wanted to add was the emphasis for the potential of a county parks and rec department. That is mentioned in there somewhere, but I think maybe emphasizing it a little bit more would be great. I think it would be very helpful to have a parks and rec department.
So Jacques, can I just ask, and I was going to mention that the Parks and Rec Master Plan is actually one of the sections that's been added as an implementation strategy later in the year. And obviously that needs good buy-in from the elected officials and administration. So that's really trying to focus on the areas where we would integrate a lot of the trail network, the parks that are there, not just community parks, but that's obviously the thrust. How that's managed, how it's governed, how it's administered, and how it's paid for. Operation and maintenance obviously are big numbers there. And a lot of places like Grand County say, why do we need more parks? We're already surrounded by parks. So, I mean, that's one of the tensions that exists there. But it was one of those gaps that just going through it looked like it was something that really needed attention.
Right, agreed, John.
All right, is there any further discussion on this section? If not, let's move on to environment. Josie and Sarah.
Right, I can start. Is Josie on now? Maybe she's not here.
I don't think we've seen her yet.
Okay, so I'll just take it. Let's see. I will integrate my comments into that Google document. Thank you for sharing that. But right now I just have notes. So the section on environment, it seemed pretty solid to me. I had some thoughts. The federal forest section, I thought we should put in there something about Grand County supporting the use of prescribed burning, or a goal to work to decrease the threat of catastrophic wildfire, and a policy to support prescribed burning and other mitigation things. But with that, we'd be working with other entities, obviously. Under Indigenous area policy, I thought we should put in there, that's all about basically doing surveys before development for archaeological sites and stuff. But I also think we should just put in there that we will use our tourism department to encourage respectful viewing and minimize vandalism of archaeological sites. A policy from Grand County to spend our tourism dollars trying to mitigate impacts in that regard. Under growth and development, maybe this is included in another part of the document, but I thought that we should have a policy to encourage developers to maintain natural drainages and to mitigate runoff and floodwaters through infiltration techniques. Maybe that's elsewhere, but trying to maintain some of the natural environment. And then there's a section on rural and urban forests, which I thought was really great, trying to maintain like an urban forest for habitat. And I'm not sure if this is where it should go, but I also think that we should consider a policy, well, a goal to allow for migration patterns for large animals, and a policy to discourage the fencing of entire lots. Maybe there could be an agricultural variance for that or something, but I know that, yeah, there could be a lot more connectivity through the 1 acre zones if people weren't fencing their entire areas. Just a thought. Oh, and then there's a section, maybe it's section 4, that says there's an express goal. I think it says to utilize developed lands within forested areas to their fullest extent prior to subdividing and developing new land. And I don't think that this is relevant to Grand County. I think our policy, the only place that we really have up in the forest is like Willow Basin. And that is like such a horrible fire danger. I think our policy should be not to subdivide in urban wildland in the forest anymore, and to not encourage development up there at all, because we can't even service that area with fire support very well. So I don't know, maybe our policy there is not to subdivide anymore in the forest. But we really don't have that much private land in the forest, except for up there.
Was there anything that you wanted to raise specifically for discussion or directing staff and the planning commission to look at beyond the topics that you've raised?
Yeah, like I said, I don't know if some of those ideas, if this is the right place for it in the document, because I haven't given it a thorough overview. So yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't heard from Josie. We didn't get a chance to connect, so she might have other things to add.
I should just add, Sarah, that it's one of the things I have thought about is not subdividing or having much density in these urban wildlands interfaces. So I think that's a very good idea that shouldn't get lost.
Yeah, and I've heard that sentiment echoed like during the Pack Creek fire by people people working on the urban wildland fire interface, you know, just saying like what the county can do is not develop those areas. So I think it's really important, especially considering like the fires that we've seen recently, even in December. That's all though. Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
Can I just go back to something Sarah said earlier? There is an appendix, I think it's in this document, I won't go there right now, but that deals with sustainability checklist. It is meant to be a voluntary one. But there are elements in there that can be articulated into a land use code. Quite a few of them could be. It becomes a very heavy-handed way of managing development so you need to usually tie those to incentives, of course. But those levels of efficiency and payback obviously are very important as far as the infrastructure is concerned over time. I'm just wondering what the appetite for either commission members is around mandatory sustainability objectives that are actually embedded into the land use code. That's a big change.
I mean, I hear what you're saying about it being heavy-handed, and I think that there's just there's probably different answers depending on what we're talking about specifically. Because I feel really strongly about the need to like restrict the amount of lawn for new developments, say. And
a few years ago, when we overhauled the overnight accommodation code, we did put in quite a few heavy-handed sustainability measures. So there's a little bit of a track record for doing that.
Yeah, there is for sure. And, you know, I recognize that's really good. The other thing around the demand side on landscaping and those kinds of things are big public policy areas. But they have a huge impact on the use of water and how that's being managed. So that's identified in the plan to some degree in this plan, and embedding that into the land use code in all of the sections, not just OAOs, but the whole kind of across the gamut of the land use code is a big change.
Any further direction from the county commission on that, or is there just general agreement that that's the right direction and then we'll figure out the specific approach?
I guess if I understood the question correctly, I think I do agree with Sarah that we should look at making some of these sustainability measures mandatory rather than voluntary. I think it's up for debate just how far we want to go in that direction. But I think that should be something that we're discussing as we move forward with the plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a spectrum. We did similar things with the dark sky ordinance where, current developments, personal homes and stuff were supposed to come into compliance and make retro changes. So I think it is a spectrum, and I think it's worth looking at implementing some of these.
Also point out that we have mechanisms for landowner participation that the Fire Special Service District and the state of Utah partner with landowners on. They don't need to be heavy-handed. They can be collaborative. Funding is available for them. A lot of times landowners find the quality of their land improves after participation in these programs. The county might look at how these are mechanized inside the county, but look at ways to encourage more participation in those kinds of things if we wanted to not be too heavy-handed and talk incentives. It's one of those we can lead a horse to water type moments. We've got a lot of opportunities for people to come get work done, but
yeah, Tony, I think you're right, especially with the wildfire side, the mitigation. It becoming, but people need to like agree to comply with that, and that people are working on it. But I do think that we could make it county policy not to create more sprawled development up in Willow Basin, or so like
certainly without guaranteed participation, like
yeah.
All right. Any further discussion? Remove my cat from my desk. All right. With that, I'm going to move us on to healthy economy and social environment, which begins on page 99 of that document. Gabe, I'll share my screen and oh, John, there we go. Let me share my screen. Also sent out a copy of this. I'll try my best to summarize, and then Gabe, if you want to weigh in as well on your comments. So there's kind of a few major themes that we've broken out here. The first is that goal number 1 is too broad. And I recommended 3 specific goals here I can talk to after Gabe has had a chance to weigh on in his comments, but it's essentially taking the items that are currently in that document with minor adjustments and splitting them into 3 specific goals so that we can track and measure them individually. So I'll go into that in just a moment. We do generally think that this was a very sound section. There's some minor suggestion that Gabe had related to business parks, just really emphasizing green development wherever is possible, and moving us forward as a county, even in our aesthetic quality of business parks. And we did want to touch on 11.51 and 0.2. The first is just more of a clarification. Here we talk about a health impact assessment. Throughout the document, there are times where assessments are listed as goals or as policies. We want to make sure that we are looking at them consistently, knowing, of course, that this section will be revised after the economic development planning process. And then this final one, we actually do want to specifically touch on, because the goal as it's written is very sort of light touch when it comes to how we set our goals around inclusion and supporting our diverse in many different attributes community. And so I took a stab at rewriting this goal to be more assertive, and then adding 2 additional items under principles to make sure that we are capturing not just the bare minimum of physical accessibility, but also considering that an inclusive community is inclusive across abilities, demographics, financial ability, cultural backgrounds, so on. So Gabe, do you want to add anything on, and then I'll go into the specifics of these goals before we break for discussion?
Yeah, I'm trying to think here what else I can add to that, because you did a really good job of synthesizing our comments and sort of, breaking down, especially the first part and the very long laundry list of policies, and perhaps kind of breaking that off into more digestible chunks and clearer goals. Let's see. And then the inclusive communities piece, for me, that was really important in terms of recognizing recognizing diversity in terms of multiculturalism and different ethnicities and different customs and practices and everything associated with all of the different types, different folks that live in our community and live in the county and occupy the county. It came up like, for example, just to give a concrete example to everyone, there was the Old Spanish Trail Arena was gearing up to host a quinceañera. For those who are not familiar, that's like a sweet 16 in the Latino community, but for 15-year-old girls. And it's a really important celebration in that culture. And because they can often be kind of large and rowdy parties. A lot of the hotels or other places that are event venues have my understanding, I haven't heard it from them, is that they're sort of turning away the requests to hold those types of events. And I was just sort of making sure to reiterate with OSTA staff that it's important that the county put in a lot of effort to really try to maintain a space where the Latino community can hold a quinceañera, because that's just, and that goes a long way in preserving inclusivity. So that's just a concrete example that came up to me for that particular item. But otherwise, like I said, I think, that your document summarizes pretty well, includes the comments that I had on this section. So thank you.
So just to touch on these goals, there's a laundry list of items in that first section. So what I've sort of synthesized down and suggest that we have a goal explicit to a diverse and resilient economy through our economic base. That we balance this with quality of life and job support programs that promote entrepreneurship, community development, and investing in existing residents. And that finally, that we balance any economic development against the natural amenities of our community, which is what makes it a wonderful place to live. And it is, quite frankly, responsible for attracting a lot of these businesses and new residents as well. In pink, you can see just a few smaller additions, such as emphasizing education amongst our more built amenities, and making sure that anywhere that we are speaking to specific industries, that we are leaving it open to the fact that those really have not been defined yet, versus explicitly stating the industries we think need economic support. So hopefully this is clear. Is there anything in here that feels like it's missing or needs further attention, or any further discussion or direction that the commission wants to give?
Just one other comment that I have is that we touched on earlier in a different section, the reference to tourism. And I think, we do have to give tourism its due somewhere in this document. And I think that this is the most natural section, obviously, to sort of really, make those references and call outs to maintaining the baseline sort of bread and butter, industry that drives our local economy. And sort of, maybe focusing on it here will allow us to be more comfortable sort of teasing it out or excluding it from other sections. So that was just something that I think would be important to mention now.
Gabe, have you touched base with August and the Economic Development Department over this section?
I'm assuming, based on the wording, I'm assuming that this was largely drafted by him and his department. Okay. I could be wrong, but that's my guess.
No, I actually drafted it, but we bounced off of this. Most of this has been bounced off of Elaine before August.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Yeah, and then it was thrown open to August. I realize he's a busy guy, like most of us, I guess. But it's thrown open for her comments. So that's part of a good comment, is that a lot of the stakeholders that we've interviewed, over 35 of them, have still not weighed in completely. So that's still an ongoing process.
So we might want to get August to weigh in, more robustly on this section.
Kevin, Gabe and I are both on the Economic Diversification Committee. And we also, as part of that, there will be some planning that happens in one of the more individual plans that will affect and restructure this section. I will say that the thing that keeps coming up, I asked the Planning Commission for some thoughts after our last call, and it's been a point of not contention, but conversation at the Diversification Committee, is the balance between attracting new businesses and new employees, where existing entrepreneurs in the county might find that the skills and backgrounds needed to fill their jobs need to come from in-migration. So do we support that over supporting existing residents who, for a large part, are rooted in service industries and tourism at the moment? And, there won't necessarily be tension there forever, but it is certainly an immediate tension. Is, by supporting our existing residents, to what extent do we need to support tourism over diversification of the economic base? Or by supporting our economic base, do we do so potentially at the risk of not being able to fully serve every employee of Grand County, with the goal of increasing their situation in the immediate moment? There's not an easy answer to that. If anyone has any suggestions on additional policies that need to be raised to counterbalance some of those tensions, I think we should include them. So unless
I
there's
mean, if
strong
any-
opinions, I'll leave that open. Go ahead, Gabe.
I mean, if anything, my thought on that, and that will continue to be that sort of manufactured tension between new businesses and established sort of tourism related businesses is kind of a boogeyman that I think it sort of distracts from the idea that, you know, many types of new, you know, developing diversified sets of businesses will ultimately serve to enhance our tourism economy in the long run, in the sense of sort of just providing more stability in our community, and also just not burning out, you know, just the sort of killing the goose that lays the golden egg sort of thing. So you know, it's hard to sort of tackle in the short term, because it looks like we're diverting resources from the main sort of the main producer to these sort of more nebulous, maybe not lower, you know, not so established types of business. But I tend to think that in the long run, it sort of ends up, you know, being sort of mutually beneficial. But yeah, it's hard to explain to everyone, or hard to sort of convince everyone of that.
All right, quick time check. It's 3:45. Our agenda packet for the Planning Commission meeting actually has our meeting officially starting at 4:30. John, are we going till 4 or till 4:30 with this, or do we have a flex? And how is everyone feeling on this call? To go
It
an
was
extra
meant to
10.
be, it was meant to be 2 hours, because that's usually got to do with the amount of resilience you have in sitting down for 2 hours to go over these kinds of things, rather than ending. It can end anytime you want. You're the chair.
Well, we will do our best to stick with that. We've got 3 sections left. So let's move on to public safety, Rick and Mary. And I don't believe Rick is able to join us right now, or is on this call. So Mary, why don't you kick us off?
Yes, I've not contacted Rick. I've been unable to meet with him. Going over this section, just a couple things, and I was having technical difficulties just like Sarah was. So these are notes on page 107. I don't know if we'd want to make it well, 107 in the Google, but it's 105 in the document itself. It says cultural and encourage growth and development and cultural sensitivity. I didn't know if we wanted to add say cultural and gender. Sensitivity. Because that's something that I have, you know, especially our people whose, I don't know, even if we want to put it as gender, I was trying to think of a neutral, but people's, how they identify themselves. That's an area of, that a lot of people have mentioned to me with our law enforcement, that there's not sensitivity towards our gay and lesbian and population. I said gender, but if someone could come up with a better word to get that across, that's that there needs to be some growth and development in that. And the other thing on page 108, I'd add to roads and rail, I'd add trails. Safety on our roads, rails, and trails. And there is not a section, John, and I don't know, I looked through it, I read it through, but I couldn't find it, where I wonder if we need a section because of where we are on search and rescue, as well as fire, EMS, and law enforcement. Should we have a section where we talk about our search and rescue, or should we integrate it into law enforcement or EMS?
Yeah, so Mary, I tried to include that in the public safety section as much as I could, because we did interview Jim Webster, which is pretty fundamental to all of this too. I did put a lot of things in here that because I didn't get a chance to talk to the sheriff, that still needs to happen. But EMS, fire, sheriff, emergency preparation is another big section too. All of that should appear here. If it doesn't appear right now, it needs to be added. And I thought I had included it. So.
Anyway, I did see a lot on that, and I didn't know if we wanted to have it its own, to have another section, right? Or, I'd like input from other people. Should that be included in one of those three categories, or should it have a category of its own? I'd like some input on search and rescue. It's the business, I think they have as many volunteers.
It's kind of a sub thing of the sheriff, but it seems easy enough to add it in as well.
Which do you think would work the best, Evan? Having it as a section of its own, or embed it?
I could see either way. Maybe embedded, sure.
So those were my main, those three things were the only things that I saw right away that I felt like weren't, the others was just adding some words, but the search and rescue, I was just not as, I think it could be strengthened.
Okay, further discussion? Under public safety. Should we move on to culture? Tony and Gabe.
Yeah, so I'll take the lead here. The first section relates to heritage and historical features, and that was the sort of the redundancy that I had called out before in the land use section, though perhaps that's, as I said, I'm not sure if that's allowable or that's, we don't have a problem with that necessarily. There isn't really a specific mention to supporting the museum in this particular area, in this and actually in either piece. I mean, the 13.2 doesn't go about calling out all the entities that are central to arts and culture, but it does seem if there's a piece that's heritage and historical features in this section, perhaps a reference to support for the future plan or the strategic planning of the museum and its strategic goals could be desirable. And also just in general, I guess, natural history and its role and the character of the town. So not just the built history, but just sort of our acknowledgement and appreciation for the natural history that surrounds us. That's easily visible and celebrated around here. 13.2 arts, culture, and tourism. This was an interesting one. I guess I kind of hinted at it before in terms of like, maybe tourism should be over here in economy, because I don't think Tony and I think neither of us felt that tourism was really comfortable in this section as a heading, at the very least, it didn't seem compatible. I think in the first paragraph under 13.2, the arts and culture community complements the tourism industry, both locally and regionally. That seems fine to me, sort of making that acknowledgement of the sort of the complementary aspect of it. But outside of that, most, if not all of the call outs of tourism just feel kind of awkward to me. I think Tony felt the same way. I'm not sure how everyone else feels about it. And it's not one of these things where I'm trying to sort of scrub tourism from our identity, though it may seem like that, but it's, ultimately, those of us, our culture as a community certainly is tied heavily to outdoor recreation, but I see locals recreating as sort of a different thing than tourism. I think that, and that can be a trap, that line of thinking, but at the same time, I think you all know what I mean.
I would agree with you there, Gabe, and I'd like to, if I can cite an example, tourism as the industrial sort of complex that we're having a lot of buyer's remorse with and are not necessarily the same thing as outdoor recreation in the way that outdoor recreation relates to our culture here. A gentleman named Brian Coombs invented some of the first whitewater motorized boats at Tagalong in the 70s and 80s. Now that's the custom aluminum welder. Now he was also a tour guide, but they don't need to be co-mingled in that context, right? We can talk about our cultural history of outdoor recreation in the community. I mean, Utah is like, you know, Black Diamond invented the cam or something. I don't know. I'm not a climber, I'm a boater. But that doesn't necessarily need to be the commercial tourism that I think much better belongs in the economy section. There's like the antique climbing shoes in a glass case at the museum, Chamber of Commerce, and I think they're different.
Can I just add a question here? This is actually meant to be more of a value-added element that you would add to tourism. In other words, it's a kind of a meeting place for tourists to come and learn. And maybe I don't understand the tourism culture here as best as you guys do, but it's a place where you can actually articulate the local historical values. I appreciate what you're saying, Tony, as far as, you know, inventiveness, creativity, those kinds of things. But if we talk about the cultural community as far as arts are concerned, local street entertainment, the cultural society, the museum themselves, to me, not all tourists are going to end up there, but it certainly adds value. And I think it changes the tourism dynamic in a lot of ways.
For what it's worth, that's how I read this section. Is I think it's written poorly in a couple, or it's articulated strangely in a couple places. I read it as arts and culture tourism, not arts and culture and tourism, but I'm even looking under policies number 1. That's confusing. But that was on my first read through anyway. That was my impression.
Yeah, I agree with some of the other commenters that I think tourism as an economic thing belongs in the economic section, and I wouldn't try to mix it in here. But
nothing worse than trying to see a play at Star Hall and then not being able to get tickets. Friends outside the building. They're just a bunch of people from Boulder.
Fair enough.
I think also just I think that there's also something to be said here about, well, I guess, yeah, not, you know, getting that clarification from John, and sorry, John, if it feels like I'm coming down hard on your section, you know, but I guess that's why we're doing this, you know, and I guess, you know, part of when I think about arts and culture too, it goes back to that inclusivity and embracing the multiculturalism of our community and recognizing also, you know, all the different, you know, cultures, I guess, you know, lowercase c cultures that exist and that form the melting pot of Grand County. And so I guess when I see that word, that's kind of where my mind goes. Let's see. Yeah, you know, and I'll try to sort of, you know, I'll try to send off maybe a one sheet sort of distilling some of these thoughts in a way that might be more useful to you. But I'll leave it there for now.
I left a couple here that we didn't get to go over during the last plan, specifically to Native tribes in Grand County. Some context here. It starts with policy number 5. The only tribe in Grand County is the Ute tribe up on top of the Book Cliffs, Navajo Nation. The Ute tribe, their business committee is generally not receptive to tourism as an economic opportunity. They do not value tourism in the way that we do. We've worked on this interface by trying to allow tourism type activities and easements across Ute lands where there are incidences of jurisdictional overlap. No, we're not interested in that. Particularly, we're on the southern end of their reservation. Their businesses, their facilities, places where they own, where they would normally see tourists coming in, are not in Grand County. The section of the Ute Nation on the south side here in Grand County is back these lands for ceremony and for hunting and for wilderness. It's just not really compatible. So that's just a little bit of the context here. And a lot like kind of what I was talking about with parks and natural resources, I tried to change up some of the land, make it read like we are here to support tribal their initiatives, not necessarily that what they want. So, you know, decisions and programs that support their cultural resilience, but not necessarily tourism initiatives that highlight their diversity. A lot of people in tribal with, they don't want to be poked and prodded and bothered in that way. They're like, so that's just some context there.
Hey, Tony, just a quick heads up. On my end, you're cutting out pretty badly. So when next time you're talking, maybe cut out your video. That'd be a little better.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Steve.
It is 4 o'clock. We have one section left. Is there any additional conversation related to the cultural section? If not, we will move on to the final section, finance, for discussion this evening. Okay, Mary, I think this is you again. Is it? I accidentally closed the window with my list.
I think it was actually me and Rick.
It was you and Rick? Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead then. Or I can pull
Yeah,
up
but
my list
I
again.
don't have very much to say. This is a relatively short section. It seemed pretty straightforward. It's concerned with just, you know, I think it's the financial impact on the county of various sorts of development. And if you haven't done so already, I think it's important to have Chris Baird have a look at that. I think he's, you know, maybe the one person who understands all that stuff very well from the county's point of view. So.
Mm-hmm. So with that, since we're at time, John, do you want to just recap any notes that you've taken that you want to revisit, and anything we need to talk about regarding to timing going forward? Otherwise, I think we can handle it via notes and future meetings, not additional meetings.
Yeah, so it's, thank you, Emily. It's rather an open-ended response in some ways, because we'd like to get as many comments back, substantive comments, in a short period, within a week here, if we could. I don't know, maybe that's too ambitious. Doesn't stop everything though, just because we're asking for that time frame. It's just us getting a document in shape that can be brought forward to the Planning Commission and the County Commission in a rather short period of time here. So that's the first thing. And because if you miss something, or you're feeling like you're under the gun, just let it go, because there'll be other chances to make some comments here as well. There is a big section on implementation here that is really taking the document itself and thinking about how it can be applied. A good example of that, I think, is the sustainability part of it too, or the land use code, or development regulations, or impact fee analysis, or parks and recreation master plan, or water studies, or governance. All of those are really things that seem to be rising and do rise to the top. So the goal with this implementation section is actually to go through every one of the administrative sections in the county and put work plans in front of them for their comments. It does push a lot of buttons, I realize, but and there's as we've been through this before, there's a matrix here as well that focuses on the various sections, which I think is somewhere in the document here. There it is, which has got a whole number of different plans on the top and decisions on the bottom, and decision-making groups, which I've tried to highlight as well. And so that's an element that will be important as we start moving ahead with implementation. So with that, I think it's just this has been very valuable. I find it very insightful. Obviously, it's not going to be as complete as maybe everybody would like, but it's been very helpful for me to get the feedback.
John, I'm going to piggyback on a request Kevin made for the land use section. Could we have a separate document that pulls out just the goals and policies underneath them from each section for ease of review?
If you look at the land use section in the implementation part,
Sorry, not
Um,
just for land use, but just across the X sections, 14, I guess, that we went through. I hate to ask for redundancy, but it would help just to kind of focus our attention on the policies and goals specific to each section.
yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking, Emily, sorry. So the part of the goal of the implementation section is actually to focus on the areas that are priorities. And then the executive summary at the beginning should be a quick summary of those things. If it's not, I realize it needs work, but I think that should be capturing what you're asking, but maybe I'm missing something.
I can follow up separately. It's not a
Okay.
big deal. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask John a quick question. When you say, let's try to finish up in the next week, will we have the same document uploaded on Google Docs? So, I've got about 40 more pages to do, and it would be nice to know I was working on the same document and wouldn't be changing on me.
No, what you're looking at on the screen right now is the document that everybody's been hitting off of.
Right, but John, will that be up for about a week's time before
Oh, yeah.
you?
Oh, yeah, we're not going to change that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone. Well, it's 4:05. We did have a citizens to be heard at the end of our agenda. I don't see anyone who has not been on here the whole time. So if you do want to make a comment, go ahead and put it into the chat. Otherwise, seeing none, thank you so much to the county commissioners for joining us. Planning commissioners, it's the new year. Our meetings officially start at 4:30. So you have 25 minutes to stretch your legs, stretch your mind, and then we'll be back here on this same Zoom meeting. And I think, John, let's just keep it open and then people can come in and turn your cameras on as you rejoin. Sound good?
Yeah.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Kudos to the chair for getting us through that document. Thank you.
And John and his team for writing it. My goodness. All right. Take care, y'all. Bye. So good. The first thing I need all day. I didn't really look at it. What? I don't know. I'll look at it. Okay.
Hey, Emily, you're unmuted if you can hear me.
Oh,
Just thought I'd let you know.
yelling across the house about the college championship.
All right.
Thank you, Jenna. For what it's worth, we're very excited in our household.
Hey, you never know what someone may say randomly, so I thought I'd catch you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. P and Z staff, I'm going to actually drop for 15 minutes and then I will be right back.
Okay, sounds good.
Great, thank you. everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Trish, you're in a different place, are you? Normally have your library behind you. Oh, shoot. we can't-
Yeah,
There you are.
there we are. Yeah. This is my tiny home.
Love it.
I live in a shipping container.
Hey, me too.
That's what I
That's really
thought.
economical.
I did.
I'm in an office right now. I'm in an office building, but
Yeah. Yeah. They're pretty
I don't
cool.
know. I don't know if that's a good thing. If you kind of knew that, that maybe means that I should have done a better job on the interior.
No, you might know. I don't know. I just heard it from somebody. They're like, "Oh, there's another one." And I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, "Oh, cool."
Is yours a
Steve, can't
Everybody
you put
thought I
a
was putting in a-
backdrop in there that's fake?
What's
Did I
that?
know?
You can put a fake backdrop in on
Oh.
a Zoom call somehow. And
Oh,
just
yeah.
make it, yeah, like you're overlooking New York City or something.
Very nice.
Well, so when I was putting in my shipping container, everybody thought I was putting in a lap pool, right? Because it's got a crawl space, and it does look like a lap pool. And I was talking to the guy that I'm dating the other day, and I said, if we ever leave, I can just take it with me, right? Like take the welds off, and then the people can have a lap pool.
It's perfect for that. Is it a 20-footer or a 40-foot?
No, it's a 40-footer.
Yeah, the 20 would be pretty tight.
That is impressive.
I love it. So I had a 1,300 square foot house, and I was like, that's too big. So I built a 1,000 square foot house, and I'm like, that's too big. And so I feel pretty good in this.
Nice. I've heard that, the tag that remains on the container, I guess, unless you remove it, you could look up potentially to see some of the storage history or, shipping history. And I'm a little afraid. I don't think I want to know, but it's kind of cool to know that I could learn more, but yeah.
Yeah.
You can't unlearn something that you don't want to know.
All right. It is 4:30. Let's see here. Josie, are you back with us?
Yep, I'm here.
And Makeda is not going to make it. So that is our group today. All right. So it is 4:30, and I'm going to call us to order for our regular meeting of the Planning Commission. Got quite a bit to cover today at the start of the meeting, but we will begin with citizens to be heard. I see a number of people on the call. We have 2 public hearings today. Is anyone here to make a comment on anything that isn't specific to one of our public hearings on our agenda? Okay. Seeing none, I just saw someone else connect, so I'm going to let them bring their audio on, make sure. Okay, so there's a couple additional people joining. If you are here to make a comment on something that is not part of our public hearings today, you're welcome to come off mute or put a note in chat. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move forward. Okay, seeing none. We actually don't have this on our agenda, but we do need to start here because it is the first meeting of the year. Our 3 open seats were filled by Tony, myself, and Makeda. And actually, I don't think we have, but there's Tony. Tony did join. And according to our bylaws, we need to vote on a chair and a vice chair for 2022. And we also in our bylaws do a review of the bylaws, but since we don't have that and haven't had that in our packet, I'm going to recommend that we have a motion to table that until our next meeting. But we'll start with any nominations for chair.
Sure, I'll nominate Emily for chair.
Okay, there's a motion to nominate Emily Campbell. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Steve. Any discussion, any alternative motions? Okay, if not, I'll call the vote. All in favor of Emily Campbell serving as chair for 2022, raise your hand. All right, lovely. And now we'll entertain a motion for chair. B, how you doing? You want to keep moving? You want to keep going? All right, I move to nominate OB as co-chair for 2022. Is there a second? seconded by Rick. Okay, any discussion, any alternative motions? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor of OB continuing as co-chair for the year of 2022, raise your hand. All right. And we continue. Like I said, I recommend it. We move to, I'm just going to put us on the table. I move that we table the review of our bylaws until our next meeting to be the first agenda item after citizens to be heard. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, seconded by OB. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, business is taken care of. Lovely. With that, we'll move on to ex parte communications and disclosures. And just even though we are reviewing something specific to an HCH, you only need to worry about conflicts of interest if it is something that you or your family or personal associates would directly financially benefit from. So with that said, are there any disclosures or ex parte communications to share? Seeing none, we will move on to approval of minutes from December 13th. And in our packet, these are all the way down at like page 100 and something. I noted it, page 149.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes from December 13th, 2021.
Okay, motion by Steve. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from December 13th, raise your hand, say aye. That is unanimous. Wonderful. Okay. So we have, excuse me, County Commission update. Tricia.
You know, I don't have much. It was the holidays. And as you know, our meeting the other day was just, yeah, we went over, you know, appointing people to boards and commissions, and you guys know what happened with the planning commission. So it was pretty quick. I think it was probably it was the quickest meeting I've been in. I think it was like, I don't remember, an hour and a half. It was fast.
Wonderful.
That's fast compared to 6 or whatever. So,
and we saw that Gabe was appointed chair, and just in case anyone doesn't know, Jacques was appointed co-chair for 2022.
Yep.
So we have new folks in those positions this year. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else before we start to move on to our action items? Okay. So we have 2 public hearings this evening. So the way that we run our public hearings, if you are joining us for the first time, is we will have staff present their report on the action item. We will invite the applicant to speak if they would like to. They are not required to speak, at which point we will open our public hearing. If you are here to make a comment as part of one of our 2 public hearings, I am going to ask that you keep your comments brief and hold them to 3 minutes or less. If you've written a letter, we've read the letters that have come in. You're welcome to speak again, but just know if you've written a letter, we have read them. And then we will continue with discussion and take action. So let me find myself in my packet. Our first public hearing is to consider and solicit oral and written comment on a rezoning request proposing small lot residential zoning to the property located at 4400 Spanish Valley Drive. And Elisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emily. So this application is for a general rezone request to change the current rural residential zoning on an 11-acre parcel located on Spanish Valley Drive to small lot residential, which would allow a net density of 5 units per acre. Taking into consideration, this is an update to my staff report actually, because we realized that what I had previously written in this section was maybe a little presumptuous in stating that the density would allow essentially 55 units on 11 acres. But I made the correction just to say that taking into consideration land dedicated to roads and drainage and open space, the developable land would likely be less than 11 acres. And therefore the density on the parcel will not be a direct reflection of 5 units per acre, but likely something less. And just to note too, this, this is a rezone request, but the applicant did submit a concept plan for future development, which proposes 9 duplex lots totaling 18 units and 20 single-family lots for a total of 38 residential dwellings with an average lot size of 0.23 acres. The rezone request requires no current site plan improvements. The later site improvements in connection to proposed subdivision of the property will be in accordance with requirements of Article 6 General Development Standards, Article 7 Subdivision Standards, and Article 9 Administration and Procedures. As far as consistency with the general plan, the subject parcel is located within the rural residential future land use designation, which is exactly what the current zoning is. It's rural residential. So there's no change there in the future land use designation. The proposed rezone for small lot residential at this location would allow for higher density housing than originally envisioned in the 2012 general plan. The future concept plan for the subject property proposes an average lot size of 0.23 acre, where the density under the current zone and future land use of RR calls for a minimum lot size of 1 acre. Therefore, the small lot residential zoning is not consistent with the current general plan. It is anticipated, though, that an increase in density may be envisioned for areas along Spanish Valley Drive in the updated general plan and land use study in order to address present day housing shortage in the area. And that's all I have for the staff report. I think we could either take questions or hand it over to the applicant.
Let's hold on questions until we've had the applicant speak and our public hearing. Is the applicant here?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, wonderful. Welcome, Jim. You're welcome to make a statement. We have your summary in our packets, but if there's anything that you wanted to add or help us clarify, time is yours.
Okay, thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to consider this. We really appreciate that. Maybe leading off by saying that the landowners who own this piece of land have lived in Moab for decades. They were longtime residents there. I first fell in love with Moab in the late 80s when I was getting on riding bikes. I would go down from northern Utah when I was in college. So this marks the 35th year I've been going to Moab and vacationing there and shopping and staying in hotels and whatnot. I do like your community. About 10 years ago, I started actively looking for land to develop down there. I was working on a piece out by Powerhouse, about 40 acres out there. That didn't work out. And I've been looking ever since for the past 10 years. And I will say it's incredibly difficult to find land that can be developed at what I would consider affordable pricing for people who are regularly employed in the county. I'm sure that's no surprise to you. In going through the general plan and the land use code, it's incredibly challenging to find land like this that we have here, this 11 acres that can be would support tighter densities. It's it's not like the land up on the east side up above the golf course, which has its challenges with topography and rock and stuff like that. And it's sited right next to a main artery that can help support increases in traffic. Also in Spanish Valley, you have the recent or semi-recent addition of public sewer and water, which can support it as well. I know that you guys have a affordable housing crisis down there. It's no secret. It's I live up 15 miles east of Park City and ski over there, and they've got similar problems to what you guys have. It's not a unique problem for resort communities. But I am a firm believer that in one of the key market principles that by increasing inventory, you can help drive the prices down and you can make it more affordable for local people. This rezone certainly won't be a cure-all, but I'd like to think of it as a step in the way with others rezones for other properties that could help you solve basically an employee housing crisis. Just this morning, or actually about an hour ago, I looked through the multiple listing service just to see what was on the market as of today. And I looked in the greater Spanish Valley, including San Juan County, and I found 15 homes actively listed for sale, ranging from 479,000 to 3.3 million. Only 2 of those homes are under 500,000, which I feel like that's a tough market. That's a tough market, even in northern Utah, up along the Wasatch Front to deal with a bit. In looking at lots, there were 13 lots, and they ranged from 249,000 up to quite a few millions. There's one on there with a lot of acreage, and only 2 lots were under 300,000, and it just clear indication that there's a lack of affordability in Moab for people. I feel like this has a very strong impact on employers down there and the strength of your economy. I've talked to a number of employers and realtors down there who feel like more needs to be done. And I'd like to think that this proposal that we have offered here will help with that. I know it's tighter densities than what traditionally has been approved in this neighborhood, but in looking at the development just to the east, Pueblo Verde, it fronts approximately third acre lot with homes on it up against Spanish Valley Drive. And so I think our average of 0.23 is not too far different than that. Our group, we're not trying to come in and make the, I don't want to come in and necessarily try to lessen the rural feel of Moab. But then again, I feel like that's been an evolving concept over the decades that I've been visiting Moab. A lot has changed. And it's unfortunate sometimes that things do need to change, but I feel like the housing crisis it is a very high priority. It needs to be addressed. So I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Jim. Are you open to staying on to answer a few questions after we've had a chance for public comment?
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful. So what we'll do is open up our public hearing at 4:44. If you are here to make a public comment, could you please post into the chat that you are here to make a comment on this public hearing? And then we'll call you to speak in the order that I see your names. If for some reason you're unable to use a keyboard or not able to post in chat, I'll also leave open the opportunity to come off mute in just a moment. So I do see a number of folks on the call. And I'm just going to give this a moment to let people join. Is there anyone who would like to come off of mute and make a comment? Looks like first we have Aaron Thompson. Aaron Thompson is here to make a comment. So Aaron, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Yeah, my name's Aaron Thompson. I live on Chapman Lane there. Yeah, I guess I look at Royal Crossing, I look at that, for example. I'm in favor and support the smaller lot sizes. It seems anything over an acre is over 300,000. And so this would help affordability. If you go down further in San Juan County, they're all 1/4 acre lots there. But I think it would help a lot with our housing crisis. I'm sensitive to the rural residential area, but I don't know what else can be done. Also, the other thing I've seen is where there's the 1 acre lots, they end up growing tumbleweeds rather than doing much good. And then a lot of the other developments, they just create a PUD and make the smaller lots anyway. So anyway, I'm in favor of the rezoning change. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Aaron. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment during this public hearing? Preston Walston, you're welcome to come off of mute. You have 3 minutes.
Yep, I just wanted to say that I'm also I'm a realtor and a property manager, and I deal with this on a daily basis. And just don't think that what Jim's doing is anything bad, and I just support it entirely. That's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments, Preston. Looks like somebody came off of mute. If you wanted to make a comment, go ahead and state your name.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Dr. Sorensen, and I'm totally against the change. Several reasons. We need more lots that have an acre so that people can have a backyard horse. They're getting hard to find. I have people ask me all the time where they can find one, and it's really hard to find. And then the density is not fitting in with a lot of the neighbors because I've got probably 12 neighbors here that have livestock. And being the neighbor to that, I've been getting a lot of slack from these other developments that just doesn't fit in. The other thing is the traffic. The road there is a one-lane road. It's not going to handle the traffic. Spanish Valley Drive is getting ridiculous. It's to the point now I can't take my livestock from my corral to my field because of the increased traffic. I'm going to have to enlist the help of law enforcement to do so. Also, where's all that water and drainage from the roads going to go? It's going to come right onto my property. I'm very concerned about that. Let's keep it rural. That's why I moved out here. 40 years ago, I moved here and there was no one around, so I could have some space. I'd like to keep that space. I'm tired of people calling and saying, oh, your corrals smell. They don't realize that when they buy those and move in. And James's comment about increased housing, I don't buy it. I don't buy it because my property taxes, I mean, it's not going to be affordable any way you do it. It went from, I own two rentals in the property development just to the east. My property taxes went from 1,500 to 2,300 in 2 years on those rentals. So it's not going to be affordable for anybody if that continues to go. Like I say, there's you got the horses on one side, on three sides, four sides. You've got goats, you've got sheep, you've got a ranch right there. Let's see, you've got hogs. You got one neighbor that has hogs. It's not going to fit in with that high density. So that's basically where I'm standing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. Sorensen. Is there anyone else who is here to make a comment for this public hearing?
Yeah, my name is Michelle Peterson, also a neighbor to this lot, and I have a question and then a statement. Will this applicant being approved for this zoning be a gateway for the other 30 acres owned by another individual to take suit as well and be able to quickly and easily move into this small lot dwellings with her 30 plus acres that are on the backside of this property? That's a question.
And Michelle, we're going to go ahead and not respond to that question right now. So you're welcome to make your comment, and staff can speak to the general effects in a moment.
Perfect. My statement goes along with Dr. Sorensen in that my husband and I, pulled up our boots and financially paid the dollar for the acre and a half that we have that backs these properties so that we could have that rural lifestyle. And we do have livestock on our property now that I can only imagine these 38 dwellings won't appreciate. The smell of the livestock and like Sorensen is saying, it just doesn't fit in. What you have out there and what we've had for years is rural housing and people out there with livestock and people paying the price for the large lots that they have done so for that type of living. And now 38 homes on this 11 acres, 300 on the acres that's out there right next to it, should it be developed as well, is 340 houses. It's just too much. And again, where's the water? We drilled a well on our property and we hope to spend $12,000 for that well, but end up spending $25,000 because there wasn't water in that field where we drilled. So I'm not certain how this field is going to accommodate 300 plus homes should we allow his development and then also the development of the 30 acres right next to it. I know that they would have to do zoning, but I'm certain that they're hoping this application is approved so that they have grounds for their application in the next year. So we are against it for the lot size request.
Thank you for your comments, Michelle. And haven't forgotten your question. We'll have staff address just the sort of general principle in just a moment. Are there any other questions, any other comments to be made during this public hearing? Yes, Mitch, I see you coming off of mute. Could you state your full name? You have 3 minutes. Oh, shoot. You know what? It's really, really hard to hear you. Do you mind seeing if you could speak into the microphone a bit closer?
Yeah, so is that better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so my name's Mitch Peterson, Michelle's husband. I just wanted, some of my concerns here is, goes along with Lynn and Spanish Valley Drive. We already see a ton of traffic issues between Beeman and the other subdivision that they've been cutting across to Stocks. To add 38 more homes going through those neighborhoods is definitely not the answer. Totally against the lot sizes. I mean, again, this is rural, you know, not meant to be congested to 5 houses per acre pretty much. Anyway, I definitely think that a different plan should be in place for this. I also have some other residents here with me too. I'm going to let them talk and they'll state their name and everything.
And just, sorry, you said you have other residents with you there?
Yeah, this is Cindy Peterson. I live on Beeman Road. And since they closed down Stocks Drive because of the culvert that was breached, the traffic going by our place right now is unbelievable. And it's not really even a safe place to have kids anymore. And if you add that many more homes to that area out there, it would actually be a very hazardous situation. You know, if the developer wants to develop it, that's fine, but I think a lot larger lot size should be considered because there's just too much traffic out there now, and to do something like that would take away the whole feel of the area.
Thank you, Cindy.
All right, I think that's all that myself and Cindy have to say.
All right, thank you very much for your comments. I think that's everyone whose names I don't recognize. Is there anyone else here to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, it's 4:55. I'm going to close this public hearing. And before we go into questions for the applicant, just for the sake of public record and awareness, Elisa, there was a question related to sort of precedent and how actions like this can affect precedent. And would you mind just taking a few seconds just to address that so that it's clear how this could affect any additional applications in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the commenter actually brought up a good point that I probably should have touched on a bit. So I'm going to share my screen again, like I was earlier, just to show what's going on here on the ground currently. So we do have like this subdivision here they're all about a ½ acre parcels in this area. And those, you know, this is all in the light yellow. This is all rural residential, which is 1 acre minimum lot size. So these are non-conforming, or I'm not sure how they ended up that way. Maybe a PUD. That was before my time. And then down here, just to give some more perspective, this subdivision to the southeast, some of these are a lot smaller even, like we're talking 0.3 acres. So there are these kind of smaller size lots that are already existing, but to the commenter's point, this is the 11 acres subject parcel here that we're looking at, highlighted in blue. And if this was to be rezoned to small lot residential, I would say definitely it would set a precedent for future rezone applications to come in and to possibly feel justified in getting approval for the same kind of density. So yeah, I think it would essentially set a precedent for moving in that direction.
Thank you very much. So Jim, if you don't mind putting your camera back on and coming off mute, I'll invite the Planning Commission to ask any clarifying questions to you. And just so that you know, I don't know if you've had a chance to sit any of our public hearing legislative action items, but what we'll do is withhold any substantive discussion until we have a motion on the table. But it often helps commissioners make a motion and sort of open up discussion to be able to just clarify any questions they have specific to the application or to our general plan and so on. So I guess to the commission, are there any clarifying questions to the applicant or to staff before I entertain a motion? If not, if somebody wants to put a motion on the table, a motion just opens discussion. It doesn't specify a vote or how you will vote.
Yeah, I would make a motion to send an unfavorable recommendation to the county commission for the proposed rezone property located at 4400 Spanish Valley Drive on Grand County parcel number 0200260040 to small lot residential zoning.
Okay, is there a second for this motion?
I will second.
Okay, actually, Rick, I saw his hand go up first, so just for the record, we'll keep that. Any discussion? And OB, you're welcome to kick us off.
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable actually rezoning this piece of land that is not on our future land use plan as saying this is appropriate to rezone. The rezone, of course, goes from one lot per acre to 5 small lot residential. That's quite an increase, the kind of thing that we usually think of as being closer to town. And I think the appropriate way to do this is what we're probably doing now, working on a general plan, a new general plan. We know that housing is a problem. The council could decide to do a high density housing overlay, that is, do more of it, and then it would be very targeted, which land, after careful consideration for all developers, might look like land that we should develop at a higher density. The same thing with the new land use policy, that is future land use kind of policy. So I think that's the right way to do it. We are probably, I don't know, a year out from doing that. The other thing about doing it under something like a high density housing overlay, if the county council thought we really do need more land, and they might well make that decision for housing that actually is guaranteed to have deed restrictions on it. And then finally, the last thing is, if we do rezone this, we don't actually know what the developer will do in the end. And that doesn't question this particular developer. It says, well, what if you can't finance it? Or what if the developer dies and it gets sold to somebody else? So we can't really tie the kind of development and the promises are made about this development to this rezone activity. So those are my reasons for wanting to send an unfavorable recommendation.
Rick, did you have any comments that you wanted to make as the second? There you
Can you
go.
hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So this may be out of bounds, Jim, but what kind of price were you thinking these lots would go for?
I'm sorry, I was on mute for a second. We've kind of been basing our pro formas looking in the 130 to 150,000 per lot range for the single family. I have not looked into the duplex pricing. There's not enough comps on the market for me to really accurately predict that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant or discussion?
I think it's just kind of, for me, it's just kind of interesting timing on this one. OB, I agree with a lot of things that you're saying there. I look at the location and it being just on that main artery road, there's utilities there. I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this land use study that lot is included in an area that does increase density. And I think it would be appropriate. And I want to acknowledge the opposition that people shared with that, with being the rural character. For me, that it's a hard call, but I've got to side on higher density. So anyways, I'm just acknowledging that it's a hard situation where it's not win-win. There's some loss associated there. Like I was saying, though, I wouldn't be surprised if the density does increase at the end of this land use study. Now, I can't predict the future, and so I would say if this is not favorably recommended and ultimately shot down by the county commission, I would just encourage the applicant to apply again, especially once that land use study has been completed. Because if it's recommended that that's increased there, the density, then I think now we've got at least more of a cohesive plan to say, okay, yeah, this is what we're envisioning and we want to move forward with this. And I share the sentiment with OB too. Times change, can't get financing, property exchanges hands. 1 property to 5 properties per acre is a pretty large increase. I would love to see maybe more like 2 or 3, just as like kind of a safeguard. But I mean, that's not how our zoning is configured currently. Yeah, that's what I got.
Josie, I love when our 8th commissioner joins us. Go ahead, OB.
I just want to add, I also agree with Stephen. I do want to say, except of course for the unfavorable recommendation, Jim, whoever put together the argument for this rezone did an excellent job. I mean, it's an excellent job on density, and it's just very hard to get affordable housing without the increased density. I think for me, this isn't the right process to do it, given what our plans have said so far. I'll feel much more comfortable once the county has said, well, these are areas where we ought to target, and here are reasons why we ought to target them for higher density. Anyway, a good job.
Josie and Tony, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in if you have any comments or discussion for the commission.
Yeah, I mean, I agree largely with what's already been said, both about process and about being realistic. It is very possible that this area in general will see changes in the future. That is kind of where we're headed. But I absolutely agree that, especially in the process of the general plan currently, that we need to be looking at rezoning like this in a much more holistic way that takes into consideration further infill that can still happen in other parts of the county that are more appropriate for increased density. And also my feeling in general is that if, as part of the general plan, we do look at any zoning and decide that increased density is appropriate, I think a lot more deed restriction needs to come with that. And I think the intention of the developer seems really, benign and actually very positive, but it's just not binding. And I am very hesitant to do any kind of rezoning like this that doesn't have guarantees of actually producing affordable housing. I think we need to do it in a much more controlled approach that is far more legislative and part of the general plan process.
Tony, did you have any comments or discussion?
My been changing actively over the minutes as the discussion has been evolving. But I look at the plat map that Alyssa had up, see smaller lots to the northwest and to the southeast. They're along the main artery. All logic indicates that this lot is the kind of lot that would be acceptable in a rational place to add a subdivision. I hear and heavily weigh the concerns of adjacent, create this precedent of sprawl. There's another even larger lot. Are they going to break that one up more? At the end of the day, though, I want the people who have left comments here today, and not the project proponents in this context, but any future project proponents, to understand our processes. Confidence in, and
hey, Tony, can you turn off your video? You're cutting out real bad.
It might not be your video, Tony. I think it might be the microphone, but yeah, let's try.
It could also be my internet. I apologize.
Okay.
My main point is that I would like any project proponent in the future, as well as the community of residents in Moab already, to understand that there is a process that needs to be followed, and they need to have, I think, much as what Obi said is good on paper. The timing doesn't. I would like to see the general plan be updated. I would like to see that. I worry about what other people will think they can, in conflict of the general plan, right?
So Tony, I want to just play back what I heard you say, because you were breaking up a little bit, and I want to make sure your comments get heard. I heard you say that the application was sound, but your concerns are timing and process, and that you'd like to see the general plan play out in order to increase confidence, maintain confidence, and sort of move forward with intent. Did I capture that? Did I paraphrase that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly the gist of it. Thank you, Ellen.
Okay. So Jim, I have a question for you. Oh, Trish, go ahead. I'll hold my comment.
Can I just make a couple comments? Is that appropriate or no?
And
if it's not, that's okay. I'll just.
You're a member, you're a non-voting member. You're very welcome to make some comments, Trisha. Go ahead.
Okay. So Elisa, would you mind putting that in the chat, the link for the survey? Because I do think it's just going to become more and more imperative to get that Spanish Valley survey out to residents, so that we truly understand what the residents in this part of the valley want. But I am going to wholeheartedly, I live very near this development or this proposed development, and I'm going to stand by the people that called in. And I'm not talking about the builders and the realtors. I'm going to stand by the people that we moved out here for a reason, because we wanted a little space. And I do agree that in the future, I understand that more density or higher density is going to happen. I had one on my street, but it was deemed affordable housing. And so it was a little bit more palatable to the community because of that, because we knew that we were providing housing for people that lived and worked here. I do not feel that that's going to be the case with this development. The development right to the north of it is extremely high end, extremely high end. And so my guess is that they're just going to, saddle on top of that and expect and build the same type of houses. And so I would agree with all of you that I think we wait until there is a mechanism to provide for affordable housing for our community if we're going to have higher density.
Lisa, I think you posted the text and not the link. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Jim, I've got a question just to clarify. In your applicant statement, there's a section on deed restriction, and you spoke to the interest of residents being able to partake in wealth building. And I don't disagree with that. What we've also seen in our county, unfortunately, is that programs that were designed and intended to increase attainability of housing to people who couldn't otherwise afford it, they flipped them. And so, houses that went on the market for 0% interest and $130,000 now are worth being sold on the market for $500,000, and they're no longer in the housing stock. And you made a point earlier that we're coming up on the limit of these large lots that can be developed in an affordable way. And I'll preface, I realize I'm just opining, but this tees up to the question. Time is not on our side with this one. And every moment that we linger, those lots get more and more expensive, and the affordable nature of them diminishes. So Jim, I'm curious, knowing that with our high density housing overlay project, the ratio was 80% of the units had to be deed restricted to local residents and employees. Would you fundamentally be opposed to that, given that that is the mechanism that this really does parallel almost one-to-one in terms of the way that we would approach this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question. I am not a specialist on deed restricted properties. I think time remains to tell how well deed restricted properties do in Moab. I know you have some developments to the north of this that I think they broke ground and went vertical just recently. They're building some houses. I think it's almost 100% deed restricted. Isn't that some type of a nonprofit community program or something? I'm not quite.
There's several in the area, though. There's one that is explicitly for explicitly for affordable housing. There's a similar project that follows the 80% to 20% ratio that's in the vicinity.
Yeah, I think from a developer standpoint, I do not have enough comfort on the financials to go into and feel good about an 80% deed restricted requirement on this property. I think it's very difficult for me at this point to assess what we think we'd be able to sell lots for. It's going to push the price down, there's no question. And I just don't know how to do that analysis from a performance perspective to look at whether we can afford to install the infrastructure, upgrade Moffett Lane, dedicate land for trails and expansion of Spanish Valley Drive. That's a tough one. In my proposed layout, which is not binding, of course, as a few people have mentioned, we put 20% in there. And we thought that was something that we could financially take that risk on. It's a tough deal. I mean, I see it both ways. I can see why you want to get local people, have dedicated lots where local people can come in. I respect that very much. On the other hand, the wealth building aspect has been a critical part of how people get ahead in the U.S. From home ownership. And if you restrict that, that comes with some problems as well, or potential problems. So I honestly don't know the answer for you. I think our proposal was we're willing to take on X number, a smaller percent than 80 of deed restrictions, but also have some free market lots we think we can put in there at a price range where people can come in and afford too, who want that product as opposed to buying a deed restricted property.
I mean, my problem is that I think I look at this from a market system, and I think in a different market and in a bigger market, I would be in favor of increasing housing stock, and more supply tends to result in lower prices overall. I think given the limitations of developable land, the high demand, and just the absolute glut that we're in, the challenge that I have being convinced of is that the market is efficient enough to get the designated outcomes that we're targeting without some sort of control. And there's, deed restrictions is one possibility to affect that inefficiency. Others are capping the, percent increase that it can be put back on the market within a period of time to tie to, cost of living and to, average housing and so on. I am for local people being able to access the wealth generation of Grand County. And I think too much of the wealth generation of Grand County has been kept in the hands of too few. So I understand this. Last thing I'll point out is I also am a not direct neighbor, but a very close neighbor to this property. I bought land here instead of the city because I wanted to be on an acre lot. My neighbor has a 2-acre lot. I back up to one of the open lots on the other side of Pat Creek. And I share the concerns of traffic. Jim, I don't think that this is your specific issue. I think there's a broader issue as far as access to the highway from Spanish Valley Drive. But I live off of Beeman Road, and I do not let my kids ride their bikes on Beeman Road because there is too much traffic from the developments in the area. And I'd really like to see the county take an assertive step at looking at this problem, given the likelihood of seeing additional applications in this area. So I'll end by saying, I think if we ask our local residents to take on the burden of increased density in their neighborhoods, that we need to ask the developers to come to the table to understand that the inefficiencies facing us, still allow for profit, but more people have costs associated with the inefficiencies perpetuating. And I think we need to look at some really deep compromises in the short term. But I want to see more housing come online, and I'm in favor of increased density to get there. So that's all I wanted to say on this. Steve, looked like you want to make one more comment.
Oh, I would just throw out, Jim, looking at different percentages of, what would be deed restricted for, whether it's local or financial deed restriction or what have you. And, because with that HDHO, we had that as the 80-20 split, but just in the future, because I'm reading the room and I don't think this is going to have a favorable recommendation. So just offering a possible another angle to look at things and see if the numbers split. And yeah, I guess the last thing I'll just leave with is, Jim, your application was awesome and all the points there. Like I want to support this, and I just echo, it's just kind of like the process and the timing side of things. Yeah, I'll just end there.
All right. With that, is there any other discussion? If not, I'm going to call the question. Okay, so we have a motion by OB and seconded by Rick. Did you second the minutes or this one? I'm so sorry, I didn't make a note. This was you. Okay, thank you. Motion by OB and seconded by Rick to send an unfavorable recommendation to the County Commission for the proposal to rezone property located at 4400 Spanish Valley Drive on Grand County parcel number 02-0026-0040 to small lot residential zoning. All in favor of sending an unfavorable recommendation forward, raise your hand or say aye. Okay, that's 5. All opposed? All abstaining? Okay, so 5 in favor, 1 abstention, no opposed, and Makeda is absent. Jim, thank you so much. I do want to just echo what some of the other commissioners said. I understand that, as the difficulties we are facing as a community, for developers to come to the table with ideas, I don't think anyone here expressed that they don't want to see your ideas move forward in some form, but that there may be mechanisms to work with the county and make it kind of more closely aligned to some of our other processes. But I do hope that you stay in touch with the Planning and Zoning Department, and look forward to seeing where this moves forward. So.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate all your time, and we're going to keep working on doing projects in Moab. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Have a great evening. And thank you to everybody who stayed on to comment during that public hearing as well. This will take us into our next public hearing of the evening, and I am just pulling up my agenda item. Bear with me. Here we go. Page 189. We have a public hearing to consider an ordinance approving the amended and restated development agreement for Viewgate Terrace HDHO development. Same order of operations. Staff will make a report. We will invite the applicant to speak if they'd like, open the public hearing, and move forward from there. So Elisa, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you.
Oh, and really quick, I'm so sorry. Trisha has to head out. Trisha, did you, anything else you wanted to add just until you?
No.
Great.
No, I really appreciate the discussion, and I'll make sure that I watch or listen to the meeting to prepare for County Commission.
Thank you so much. Good luck with your class.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, Elisa.
Okay, so this is another development agreement that's being amended in order to extend the final plat deadline for the HDHO. So this is very similar to, well, it is the exact same process and document essentially of the Murphy Flats extension and amended development agreement. So it's for the Viewgate Terrace HDHO project, and this would extend their final plat deadline for 6 more months. They're very close to having all of their materials in for phase 2 to be completely processed to decision. So I highly doubt it's going to take that much time, probably even just like a couple more months for them to get their phase 2 final plat processed. But expiration was October 15th, 2019. I did verify with Christina that they are allowed to retroactively apply for this extension even after their deadline expired. So yeah, the development agreement allows for that 6-month extension. That also the wording is added into the development agreement regarding nonprofits and local businesses being allowed to own fee simple title for the HGHO deed restricted units, as long as the owner of the local business or nonprofit is a local, and they qualify under the 4.7 requirements. So it's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, let me know.
I thought I might have seen the applicant on earlier, but I don't see them now. Do you know if they're planning to?
I don't think that William was going to participate. I let him know he was invited to make any additional comments, but that it was a pretty straightforward ask, and that he didn't really have anything pertinent to add, I don't think.
One thing I just wanted to throw out there, and I might have completely misheard this, but just for a matter of the record, and at least maybe you can confirm this after I say it, but I think I heard you say that the approval had expired October 21st, 2019, but I think it should be October 21st, 2021 is when that expired.
I'm sorry. Yes, you were right.
Okay, and you may not have said that. I just wanted to
No,
throw that
I
out there
did.
for a
I
matter
was
of the record.
reading I was reading when the ordinance was approved. So the approval of the ordinance was October 15th, 2019, which makes the expiration 2 years from that date. So it is the expiration was on October 15th, 2021. So yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Thanks
No
for the
worries.
clarification.
Sure thing.
All right, so the applicant is not here. With that, it's 5:24. I'm going to open the public hearing to see if there's anybody to make a comment on this particular item. I'm trying to keep track of who spoke during the last public hearing. If you're here to make a comment, please come off of mute. All right, doesn't look like we have anyone here to make a comment. So with that, we will continue. I'm going to just leave the public hearing open for another minute or two, just in case. Are there any questions for Lisa or staff to clarify? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing and entertain a motion.
I move to send a favorable recommendation to the County Commission to adopt the ordinance approving the amended and restated development agreement for Viewgate Terrace HDHO development, allowing for a 6-month extension of the Phase 2 final plat approval deadline.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by OB. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of sending a favorable recommendation to the County Commission to adopt the ordinance approving the amended and restated development agreement for Viewgate Terrace for a 6-month extension, raise your hand, say aye. Okay, 1, 2, that's 6 in favor and 1 absent, no opposed. Wonderful. Okay, that takes us through our action items. We have survey update. I think that's worth going into understanding when that's going to go live, since that came up this evening. The staff report on land use code updates and oh, excuse me, then we'll move on to future considerations. So survey status.
Okay, so I did not expect that Laura wasn't going to be here, but she has been working on this. I think where we're at right now is she prepared a postcard mailer that would go out to all the Spanish Valley residents, and she was able to get all of those addresses through our GIS technician. And she's having that postcard printed with the link to the survey, which would be on Grand County Connects. And I'm hoping the plan for getting that mailed is this week, by the end of this week. So the draft has been updated with the comments from the last round of feedback that we had. And she included an updated map on the trail connections. So I think that's in the draft that's on Google link, on the Google link, but I'll make sure what you guys have for that that's linked actually has the updated maps that she included. I'm not sure if it does. But yeah, it's moving forward, and I know she was out with, we were all affected by COVID pretty much over the last over the holidays and through the week coming back from the holidays. So she is definitely on it, and we'll let you know if there's any delay.
Would you mind just sending an email with an update towards the end of the week of whether it's going to go out? And then I think it's worth in our meetings going forward, just reporting on how many responses we've gotten.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And any trends that are standing out, and that way we can stay close to it as some of these other things advance. So
definitely.
And then last request is, can we get a bit.ly link for it so that we can share it out to our own channels?
Right. Yeah, definitely. We were going to do that as well. I just wanted to make sure that we had we'd actually been ready to launch the official survey before we sent that link out. But that was part of the plan as well, is to email everybody within the county, basically commissioners, with everybody within our network in the county, and then have folks disseminate the survey as they saw fit.
Perfect. Thank you. OB, it looked like you came off of mute. Oh, wait, you're muted now, though. There we go.
You're still muted.
I did go off, and the reason I did is I could have sworn that I went to Grand County Connects and the survey is up.
Is it already live?
And it is. And so here I went off to see if it was, and it's up on Grand County Connects.
Okay, that's good. That's awesome. All right. So the version that we're looking at on the Google link, I think, is outdated. So so that one is live then, and that means that Laura's probably really close to sending out the postcard with that link.
Okay. Here is a direct link if anyone on the commission wants to open it up and bookmark it. Exciting. Perfect. All right. Any other questions for staff related to this? Otherwise, we'll move on to land use code updates. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so this staff report has kind of evolved since I first put it on the agenda, and it's been tabled a couple times. And since then, I've gotten more feedback from folks for, kind of urgent, imminent updates that we need. So I'll just start at the top. In terms of Article 3 use regulations, we are proposing the possibility of updating the commercial zoning, specifically general business zone. We've noticed that within all of our commercial zoning, we don't really have a lot of specific categories that are allowed, and that could potentially be expanded to specify actual retail categories and allow for more economic diversity. I think that was kind of the idea behind that update. And that one could be something that is more in line with the general plan and more in that kind of category of an update, but I wanted to put it in there just to kind of give it some consideration. It's not a fully developed idea yet. But the other one that did seem to spark a lot of urgency with folks that I've been speaking with in the county, and also with some of the commissioners and county commission, is to create some kind of an overlay district while we kind of work on our housing plan, affordable housing plan update, and the general plan and land use study and all of that more long-range planning. This would be more of an interim solution to providing workforce housing, which would be either a camp park style cabins or RVs or tiny homes, that sort of type of development being allowed in certain areas as an overlay or as a conditional use permit, or even the possibility of allowing apartment buildings. So that's something we're working on, some language to present to you all.
Just to get ahead of that, enforcement has been a question. I'm personally fully in favor of all of these options, but I know enforcement of rentals has been an ongoing issue. And as you introduce RVs and other temporary housing into the mix, I'm sure it gets more difficult. At some point in our next meeting or the meeting after, could we just get a quick note from Josh or Christina or both, just in terms of their willingness and capacity to?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Josh and I have been talking about how to address that if we do propose something like this and it gets adopted. He had some really good ideas on how he was already envisioning the kind of can of worms that it could create with enforcement. And so he was kind of coming up with some protocols on how he could track and enforce the long-term viability of those rental units or RVs as they would be. So yeah.
So let's make sure something, if a proposal hits the agenda packet in coming months, that it's associated with a plan to manage.
Oh, that's a good idea. Definitely. Okay.
It's wonderful, actually, as you were talking, because somehow this afternoon it hit me. We're never going to get tiny homes built. And then it hit me, but not high density, but an overlay where you had tiny homes.
Yeah.
You could do it, and you can't build tiny homes unless you're approved to build those tiny homes under certain kinds of conditions, but you could sure do some density improvement. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, and then it would be similar to what we do with the HGHO or even the OAO campground RV sites, where we actually have some say in what goes into the master plan and what we're requiring, what it would look like on the ground. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
I don't want to take us down this road too far, but given the last application, or the second to last, as John would say, the penultimate application, I wonder, I mean, traffic patterns associated with higher density continues to be an issue with any of these applications. And I wonder if there's a way to potentially govern part of that through adjusted parking spots, parking spaces and supports, given how close you are to the city center and to eventual transit centers. I wonder if there's a way to incentivize, non-vehicular dominated developments where we increase density, keeping in mind that the people living farthest from the city are the people most in need of transit back into the city. So I'm realizing that's tense. But that's just another light to keep on as we look at some of these, is how do we decrease the traffic impact, especially in residential areas, anywhere where we potentially increase density, even if that density is increased through less impactful construction methods such as ADUs and tiny homes.
Yeah, I could see that being part of an analysis on the front end when we go to maybe target areas that we would like to see this kind of density or workforce housing being developed, that we could actually target certain areas that would already be supportive of the traffic that they would be, impacting. So yeah, that's definitely something we can include in the language in the proposal.
Okay.
Bringing this forward. So ADUs, we still haven't updated our code on ADUs and to become compliant with the Utah State Code changes. And so we really need to get that done. That's a high priority. That's section 3.3.2. And that allows, it basically says, the internal ADU square footage is, there's not a maximum area for that under state code. So we need to change that in our code. Also, there's a possibility we could go over and beyond what the Utah requirements are in terms of allowing reduce setbacks where ADUs would be built if they are currently prohibited because of the current setbacks. We could look at that as a possibility for increasing ADUs. And then of course the city has updated their ADU section, allowing for additional ADUs on parcels. So more than one ADU is allowed on parcels in the city currently. So that's an interesting strategy that we could look at and may want to emulate, but not sure if we would want to go that route. It's something I would try to kind of provide an analysis and bring this all back to you guys in the following meeting, and more of a kind of analysis. Also goes the same for manufactured homes. We also need to update our code to be in compliance with the state code for those. And then Article 4, oh, sorry, there's another, so in this, I'm not sure where this would be, but I think in Article 3, we need to look at the temporary land uses for special events. I know Mallory's been working on some changes that need to happen in regard to the special events, and that it would go under temporary land uses. So I don't know what that looks like now, but it's just something I wanted to put in here as a potential update that could happen in this round. For Article 4.
Can I butt in real quick?
Yeah.
On section 3.2.1, number 2, where we're talking about the code essentially prohibits manufactured homes, the way the code is currently worded, open to other ideas. Something that stood out to me, and this confused me for the longest time, and so I'm just going to throw it out there for this body, because I think it may prove helpful. A lot of people confuse manufactured homes with modular homes, and they're totally different in terms of coding. So a manufactured home is going to be like a trailer, like a mobile home, and like it says there in point number 1, that's to HUD requirements. But a modular home, so this could be something built anywhere in the world and then shipped, trucked, whatever, and that could be plopped down on a piece of property. That's built to, you build that to your local code, whether it's IBC or local, whether there's nuance or anything there. And so it is treated just like it's a regular old home, but it was built elsewhere. And a lot of people think, oh, well, it's a mobile home because it moved. It's not a mobile home. It's a modular home, which is just a home. It's a stick built home. Right. So I just wanted to throw that out there because that tripped me up for a long time. And so as I look at that in the context of how to get creative and make having ADUs possible and feasible for folks, it can still be like an outsourced, out of town home built, moved onto property, plopped down, and then you've circumnavigated any manufactured home requirements or anything because it's not a manufactured home.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's a really good distinction to make. And I think I don't think we talk about modular homes in our code at all. So it might be something that we want to make the distinction of.
And maybe just like like a glossary type thing, because to go into any depth on it would be redundant since there's already code for that sort of thing. But I think especially as modular homes are becoming more available and popular, like these companies are sprouting up everywhere because a lot of places are having supply issues, labor issues. And so that's the thing, basically for resort towns and other places, outsource the labor and the material and then just ship it in, plop it down, you're good to go. Right. So I think it'll become more and more prevalent in the future, or relevant, I should say.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to Article 4, the main section of the only section in Article 4 that we would be looking at making changes to is the OAO section. And so that's a long list. I don't need to go through all of the details of that. We've gone through this previously in meetings. But essentially, we're kind of going in the direction of cleaning up the OAO RV campground section to make it more implement friendly. It just doesn't read well, and it's hard for applicants to interpret what is it really required in the map versus what's required in the narrative. And we end up getting these applications, and the materials that are submitted are kind of, we end up having to go back and forth and clarifying with the applicant, what is required, what we need in order to process that. It also doesn't require the assured housing, and so then folks are not able to provide assured housing as part of their proposal, and so that kind of hurts their proposal in general. So we wanted to look at possibly requiring assured housing in a certain kind of reasonable way for OAO RV campgrounds, just like the other OAO sections require that. Somehow that got left out back when this was originally getting adopted.
I think it got
and
left
then
out because of the cost structure.
the cost, yeah.
There was a maybe it was in our draft economic report. We looked at the numbers of the feasibility of assured housing for various uses. Like, for example, residential had no feasibility to assign it. So there's probably a little bit of background there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it could be something that we could adjust for the amount of units or the type of development that it is. If it's like a really primitive campground, maybe that, and it was a smaller amount of campsites, it would not require maybe just one employee housing unit, or not as many, but it could be more just adjusted for the level of development. Like the full-on 60 unit max RV park that was proposed at Willow Springs, like that developer actually really wanted to include their employee housing, and they were going to do like 6 units, and that was feasible for them and it made sense, but they couldn't include it because it would have been considered like quid pro quo. So legally they couldn't assure the body that they would provide the employee housing. So some way to fix that would be beneficial, I think. And then, of course, the Dude Ranch Destination Resort category, it's not, I did confirm that it is not something that will actually be permitted anytime or anyhow with this, the way that the code is written, because it's only permitted, that use is only permitted within the OAO hotel districts that currently exist on the ground. So you cannot apply for a Dude Ranch Destination Resort OAO district to a property at all. You could develop something like that within an existing hotel overlay, but I think that's pretty unlikely.
So those two things seem very different to me. Again, I realize this is work in progress, but like a Dude Ranch to me is the developments on the River Road. A destination resort is more aligned to the stargazing resort.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing too. They're combined as like one category, and they don't think they really relate very well. So I think that section kind of needs to be really overhauled, basically. And one of the ideas that we've had was to simply replace that with the special purpose retreat category that would be more in line with some of the kind of glamping or other type of camping. It almost like a destination resort, but more in that glamping style, I guess.
Can we get some direction there from the county commission? Because I watched the discussion related to the Westwater retreat, and there was some concern that because it was located deeper in the county, it was even less, I don't know, it was less likely to support because it was deeper into the county, and they wanted to expose less area of the county to that, versus what Tony had spoken to, which made a lot of sense, which is, placing low impact glamping type resorts out in the desert, so long as it's feasible and sustainable, doesn't have the same impact on the town and the residents of Grant County as it might. So I think we need to get some clarifications from the commission there so that we can make sure that anything we send forward maps to their mental model.
Right. Actually, it's interesting, the conversation when they were looking to make a decision on Sky Retreat, the county commission did bring up, and I can't remember which commissioner it was, but it was brought up that because it's actually located out in a remote area away from town, that the reason they ended up approving it was essentially, one of the reasons, I guess, was that the impact on housing was kind of irrelevant at that point, because it's not like you're going to provide a bunch of housing out there anyway. So I think that was actually Commissioner Walker that brought that up, and I thought that was interesting and very insightful in terms of like where they're thinking about these kinds of developments and where they're more suitable versus not suitable. So yeah, that was an interesting conversation for sure. So let's see, Article 6, general development standards. We have a request from Commissioner Stock to look at water conservation measures in this round of updates. And she mentioned that Mila at the city is working on some water ordinance that they're going to propose soon. And that Dana with GWSSA also had some ideas that she was talking to Commissioner Stock about. So we're hoping to get in touch with both Mila and Dana and sort of zero in on what, what these ideas for a water conservation ordinance would look like for the county. And if we can include it in this update, that was kind of the ask from the commission. So any questions about that?
Sorry to keep percolating my little comments in. I have one thought, but I'll pause.
Okay.
I was speaking to somebody recently who was employed as a plumber in town, and he was sharing anecdotally some examples of waste, water waste, particularly with new and redeveloped properties, where historically, largely in the city, but he said he's seen this in the county, retrofitting inefficient pipes and fixtures on the county side of the water meter often doesn't happen at the time of development or redevelopment, and then is later brought in at a much higher public cost, just because of timing with the developer and, a nominal cost in the development schedule is, for obvious reasons, they're trying to shed the fat wherever they can. I don't know anything more than that, just at the anecdotal basis, but given his expertise and experience, it seemed like something we should look into, of just like, right now we are requiring easements for an eventual trail along Spanish Valley Drive, for example. It seems like we should have a similar standard when it comes to updating infrastructure.
Yeah, definitely. I like it. No, we'll definitely add that into the this water conservation idea for an update to the land use code.
And for our larger developments, I know we're going to look at redevelopment standards for OAO. It seems like also looking at inefficiencies of plumbing and fixtures at that time as well would be the right time to address that. So anything we can do to just, save 10 gallons here, there a month adds up.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. Thank you.
I have a question about the assured housing. I think it speaks to the first bullet there.
Yeah.
I apologize if I've asked this before. I may have, because I've been curious about it for a while. But since we're seeing a lot of the old hotels or motels being bought and then renovated, does the assured housing apply to them or not, since they're not actually going through the the process? I wonder if that's something that we could try to pass through legislation to get that in there, because I think since the the OAO was created, we haven't really seen any new hotels, and that's likely to continue for a while, or they're only going to trickle in, I think, because we kind of hit that wave and now it's a lot more costly, and so the more cost-effective thing to do, or the easier way to go about this. If you want a hotel to make some money, buy an old one off someone who's looking to retire,
Right.
renovate it, and essentially it's a new hotel. But I just wonder if there's a way that we can capitalize on some assured housing gains.
It's adding units. That's the trigger.
Oh, okay.
And we don't allow for expansion. We only allow for redevelopment, the same number of units. The faster we move to looking at expansion as a way of incentivizing some of these community-oriented opportunities, the better. But sorry, Obi, I jumped in. Go ahead.
No, actually, I before the overnight thing was kind of went through a moratorium, etc. But whoops, there I still am on. That there was this thing of, if you did change the size of a hotel in a reservation, I think you did have to make it larger for the assured housing stuff to start to kick in. And then I think it was only on how many more units you added. I think.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah, I know. We were hoping to find some way to fix that in terms of, I mean, I just don't know where we would go with looking at ways to require the assured housing for hotels at this point, because we are not getting any applications for those. And I don't think you can apply under our code for a hotel right now. So, and then those that did get in approval for their hotel back, it was before the assured housing ordinance was adopted, so they don't have to follow that requirement. But in terms of the single family dwelling sort of threshold for requiring assured housing, there's some potential issues with that, and it's not being implemented currently the way that it's written in our code. It's just it's not very doable. According to our building department, the calculation for assessing, or the timing for assessing the value of a single family dwelling, it's not something you would actually get a value for until it's got the certificate of occupation, I think, or something, to where it basically is too late to to slap on this fee, or a fee in lieu, or assured housing requirement. And so what we really need to do is change the timing for assessing that value to when the building permit is being pulled. The applicant at that point is aware that they're going to be subject to this fee or requirement to build assured housing if they go beyond the department's calculation of what is it, 3,000 square feet or 800,000 in their value. And actually, it's also been brought to our attention that that should only be based on the actual dwelling and not including the accessory structures, as the accessory structures can actually add up pretty quickly to 3,000 square feet, and that's not really a fair assessment of something that's kind of needing the assured housing at that point. So we were going to look at that. I've been working with Bill Hulse and our building inspector on kind of fine tuning that and making it so that it actually works on the ground. And then the last thing that we have been wanting to include in this update is, and this is something we've been talking to Christina as well as Chris Baird in developing a requirement for all new subdivisions to provide a certain percentage of affordable units. Moab has an interim ordinance in place that requires something like 33% affordable units in subdivisions, and Park City also has used this strategy. A lot of places use it. I don't know we're kind of just beginning to look at what would be appropriate for the county to assess in terms of a percentage. But we have to do some work to update the affordable housing study and provide that nexus to justify something like that. So that's kind of in the works, and I'm hoping that we can get it, the data updated in time for a land use code update soon in this round of updates as well. So.
Great. Thank you for carrying this forward. I realize it's a lot. Okay, it is 5:57. Here's what I'm going to recommend, since we've all been sitting in our chairs for 4 hours. One, thank you for including these dates at the bottom of the staff update, Elisa. I think the more visibility we have into upcoming dates, even if they're tentative, the better. I know we're sort of wrapping up staff updates and then we're going into future considerations. So there's a lot going on right now. We have the Spanish Valley survey, we have land use code updates, we have the Nexus study coming out of the county that affects this. Just any way that we could get like visibility into these priorities, even if they're just in like a spreadsheet form with status and dates in our packet, just so we are all kind of like not going cross-eyed where they all intercept. I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
And that way, like, if you wouldn't mind, call out periods of time to contribute. So for example, John, at the end of our workshop today, said, we want to get all comments in by a week from now. Like, we should have a calendar that we have, like, this is upcoming, this is when comments need to be in. And that way it takes the burden off of staff to chase us down. And it means staff has the information they need to move forward and we can keep the ball rolling. Yeah. Our future considerations both relate to upcoming things. One is planning for a joint meeting with Moab City, and the second is upcoming meetings and forums. Just given the time, I'm going to ask that go out as an update over email, unless there is any specific ask or discussion that needs to be had. We don't have a current agenda for Moab City other than just kind of some high level talking points that I'll make sure staff forwards so you all have visibility. At a high level, it's just kind of just developing a working plan between the two bodies is step one. And we also have not had any follow-up from San Juan County, so it's just Moab City at this point. So sorry.
And I would just add that we're looking at tentatively June 24th, our next planning commission meeting to host
January.
the city. But we're not sure. I wanted to check with everybody about that here. And then Corey is going to be looking into it with his planning commission to see if that would work for them. So it is kind of just up in the air still, but that was one idea.
Mm-hmm. And that was January 24th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So everyone's homework is to check your calendars this evening and to let staff know if January 24th doesn't work for you. And then we can get that going. Doesn't work for Steve. So let's get a count back to the staff by Wednesday to make sure that we have a majority. And let's do this. Let's do January 24th and the following meeting as well. So Lisa, if you could just send out a follow-up email tomorrow morning with like potential dates, and then we can get a visible count on 24th and then that first one in February. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Everyone? Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. It is 6 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and close this down. Thank you, staff, so much. The progress on the general plan is incredible, and the land use code updates are incredible. And we know that you're carrying a lot behind the scenes. Anyone have any final future considerations? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
I just want to say, planning department, you all are awesome. I know we're trying to get out of here, but John, Lisa, Jenna, Laura, I've just finally wrapped my head around everything. I think I say that every meeting, but I realize at the end I still don't know. But just to have like the workshop we just had, and just to have the survey out, like, y'all are awesome. So yeah, you should be acknowledged. So that's what I'm doing. Nice job.
And
I'm
I
done.
would say then amen, and I move that we adjourn the meeting. But really true, they're really great.
Come on, Steve, come in with a second.
I second that motion to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you all so much for your time today. Take care. All in favor? Well, yeah, great. Universal. All right. Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.